After the Devil Beast Kings, revealed in disguise as exchange students, gathered to discuss Vortian's plan tied to the legend of the hero, they agreed that the disturbing presence they felt could no longer be ignored. Now, with Alicia captured and transformed into a devil beast, cutting off her bond with Clevatess, can she return to her true self? With new revelations unfolding, will they finally face the enemy this time? Let's find out. On the other side of Salcian, within the staff living quarters, Rod was busily writing at his study table. He remarked how Gart always had a tendency to show up out of nowhere, just like now. As he entered through the window, Gart approached and reminded Royce that he flew for him, while he gathered intelligence in return. That was the deal between the two of them. Gart insisted that Rod had to earn every flight he made. Rod removed his glasses and expressed disbelief that Gart had come a servant of the Orgide Oracle. Rod told him that, from that day forward, he should address him as Burns, having just been appointed as the new history teacher. Gart sarcastically replied that if anyone was listening, then sure, he'd call him Burns. He then repeated Rod's full name, Rod Royce. Gart said he knew exactly why he was there, to uncover Dorell's secrets, which just so happened to be his goal as well. He then asked if Rod had figured anything out yet. Rod responded that his investigation was still ongoing. So far, all he had confirmed was that there didn't seem to be any literal hidden chamber within the main school building itself. Mikkel has searched it. He is a reconnaissance specialist conducting covert investigations. And if Mikkel said there was nothing, then it was certain there truly wasn't. At that moment, Mikkel could be seen spying from the ceiling of a hallway where Vice Headmaster Rob was walking. He waited for Rob to pass before dropping down. Mikkel was now monitoring him. Rod explained that his method mainly involved questioning, and that he had already uncovered a few things. Whenever he got the chance, he would strike up conversations with the students of the Magic Academy. By befriending them, he was able to gather information. Because of this, he had learned that students in the school often disappeared without warning. Gart was surprised to hear that this happened frequently. Rod added that, apparently, most of the students returned safe and sound. They even mentioned that it was considered a rite of passage to acquire sorcery, which was why no one raised any objections. In fact, the more talented students were typically eager and excited to experience it. When they return, some of them gained new magical abilities. Others, if they have no ability, like Nathan a few days ago, came back completely drained, eventually getting suspended or expelled from the school. Even for those who awakened to new powers, there seemed to be dangers attached. Rumors said that some of them became like entirely different people, quiet, withdrawn, and avoiding interaction with other students. These individuals were referred to as the Awakened Ones, and they were feared. The students being referred to were then shown, along with the noticeable changes in them. Gart insisted that, in other words, they were separating the wheat from the chaff, then brainwashing them. Rod shared the same opinion. However, the problem was that they still didn't know how it was being done. He was certain it was connected to Dorell's secret chamber. Gart believed that the missing students were the key to their investigation. He asked who was currently missing. Rod replied that it was the foreign student from Haydn, Alyssa Slayhunt. Finding her would be the key to solving the mystery. Gart mentioned that she had already been missing for 3 days. She could return at any time as one of the Awakened Ones, and that wouldn't be unusual. However, what Rod feared more was the possibility of her being purged as a spy. That, he said, would be too cruel for these children. Gart thought if Rod hadn't realized yet that she is the actual hero. He added that there was something even more alarming being whispered around. Rumors of devil beasts appearing alongside the disappearances. That was something he would still need to look into. For now, Rod was still researching the history of the school. There might be hints hidden there related to the disappearances. He asked Gart to inform him immediately if he noticed anything. He replied that was the only thing he could do, but Gart assured him that nothing ever escaped his eyes, and if he spotted anything, he would let him know. Rod said he was counting on him. The two bumped fists, sealing their agreement to work together. Suddenly, Gart transformed into a bird and flew out through the window. Left alone, Rod remarked that he definitely couldn't call Gart an ally, but admitted that he truly was reliable. In another room, a girl could be seen pacing back and forth, wearing pink slippers and a purple nightcap. She kept wondering what she was supposed to do. She couldn't sit still, growing increasingly frustrated over Alicia's sudden disappearance. That girl was Nay, now fuming as she recalled Alicia saying she believed she had figured out the true nature of the secret chamber. She had been completely stunned upon hearing that. But right after saying those words, Alicia had suddenly bolted away, and before she even realized it, she was gone without a trace. Nay was irritated because she herself had been seeking answers to that same mystery, and if she didn't find them, she was certain the Emperor would have her beheaded for real. At the thought of that, she felt nauseous and ran to the window. If the Emperor found out that she had given a hint to the hero, who then ran off with the answer to the secret, she was sure she would die. This time, she was absolutely certain of it. She cried out that she couldn't take it anymore. She would die from the shock just from seeing the instruments meant for her execution. She tried to reason with herself. She could control iron, so it was unlikely they would use any execution method that depended on it. But that only left worse possibilities: being tied up and burned alive, boiled in a massive pot, or having her arms and legs pulled apart while bound. With these thoughts swirling in her head, she dropped to her knees, trembling. She was losing her mind thinking about what she could possibly do. Getting back on her feet, she told herself she had to find it no matter what. It was her duty to carry out the Emperor's orders. She racked her brain, trying to recall exactly what the hero had said before they parted ways. Alicia had mentioned eliminating the secret, the root cause of the conflict, before it led to war. She also said she was collaborating with the twins from Eslan. That left Nay wondering, why the twins? They didn't seem to have any connection to the two teachers who had also gone there. It could be that Alicia had chosen to align with them on purpose because they weren't soldiers. Still pacing, she became convinced there was no way she could figure everything out on her own. If only there was someone she could collaborate with who had the ability to uncover what was really going on. She thought of Clen, but immediately rejected the idea. He was too terrifying. He struck fear in her heart at a primal level that she couldn't handle. Then she considered whether she could collude with one of the students there, someone like Andrew, Mary, or Ray. But if she involved any of the regular students, she might only worsen her position. She thought about whether the foreign exchange students like Edison or Sarasa could help, but in the end, she still couldn't decide what to do. She called herself an idiot and scolded herself for leaking secrets. She then wondered what was wrong with her. As she stared out the window, she wondered what else she could possibly do. Just as Nay finally decided to run away and escape, Clen suddenly appeared behind her. He told her to let him hear more of what she was saying. Nay was completely shocked by his presence. She froze upon realizing who he was. It was Clen, the very person she feared the most. She stepped back and demanded to know how he got there, insisting that she had locked the door and windows. On top of that, this was the women's wing of the teacher's dormitory. Clen replied that he simply followed the scent of the wench named Alicia. He knew she had come here and spoken with Nay for an extended time, and because of that, her scent had lingered slightly in the room. Nay couldn't believe what she was hearing when he mentioned the scent. Clen explained further that after 3 days, the scent had begun to fade. Alicia had yet to show up again, so he had no choice but to track her down. Nay was stunned to learn he was following a scent and sarcastically asked if he was a dog. Clen answered that he wasn't. However, even using his nose, he still couldn't locate Alicia's main body, which was a problem. Her scent had suddenly vanished in the area filled with greenery east of the school building. If she had been killed, her scent should have remained, so it was likely that she had been taken somewhere else. It was possible she disappeared without leaving a single trace. Despite it all, she was still a hero of sorts. If she had sensed danger, she surely would have put up a fight, even a little. But he couldn't detect even the slightest trace of that. She had fled after speaking with Nay, and Clen believed that meant the girl had reached an important conclusion on her own. Nay grew increasingly anxious as Clen's aura shifted, and he demanded that she tell him everything she knew about using power there and about the frequent appearance of devil beasts. Every last word exchanged between them, and if necessary, he could scramble her brain to force it all out of her. Nay grew weak at his threat. She asked how he could say something so terrifying with such ease. It looked like he was dead serious about what he said regarding her brain. He kept bringing up things like shadows and scents and more, which led her to finally ask if he was even human. Clen smiled and asked if that would finally make her speak. Slowly, his horn began to glow, until he fully transformed into his true form, the Devil Beast King, Clevatess. Nei's eyes widened in terror upon witnessing it. Clen said that if she had now seen that form, then perhaps she understood. She could either obey him or die. And of course, he wasn't going to let her die that easily, either. Nei broke into a cold sweat as the realization hit her. This was truly a problem. She was finished. She was certain of it. As Clevatess gradually reverted to his human form, he told her that if she understood, then she should hurry up and speak. However, because of everything that had just happened, Nei couldn't respond at all. She simply fainted on the spot, prompting Clen to jab his tendril into her forehead while telling her not to pass out on him. The purpose of piercing her with his tendril was to jolt her consciousness awake. Nei was completely shocked as it felt like her brain had been struck. She fell to her knees, complaining about the pain. Clen then asked if she was finally awake. If so, he told her to start speaking. With blood trickling from her forehead, she tearfully responded with a quiet yes, master. At that point, she thought to herself that it didn't matter anymore. She had no choice. That night, Nei disclosed everything she knew. Clevatess simply replied, I see. Everything happening, according to her, seemed to follow the pattern of events from the legend of the hero. He then brought up the town of origin, noting that it aligned with what Zaftir had also said. He decided to ask his servant directly what she had realized. After that, Clen wanted her to tell the stories she knew about people turning into devil beasts. Still kneeling, Nei explained that in her generation, those who failed to adapt to the crystals would end up becoming devil beasts. Most of the time, they couldn't return to their original forms, but things seemed different now. She couldn't remember exactly when it happened to her, but from what she had heard, there was a trial that tested whether someone could bend the power to their will. If they could, then they would gain that power. However, if they were consumed by it, even their hearts would turn like that of a devil beast. The outcome would be that they were hunted down by other teachers or students. Clen considered that information carefully. It was possible that his servant had been dragged into this so-called trial. Nei replied that if that was the case, then it would cause chaos if a devil beast were to appear. And if she had already obtained that power, then she should have gotten out of there by now. Clen wondered if perhaps she had been hidden somewhere in the form of a devil beast. Nei hadn't expected that. If that was true, the question was, who did it and why? If they had done that knowing that she was the hero who defeated Dorel, then Clen began to chuckle as something occurred to him. He pulled out the Book of Toa and wondered if that might be what they were after. Since he wasn't with her, they might have assumed it would be easy to take it from him, thinking he was outside his own domain. Nei, upon seeing the book, thought she had seen it somewhere before. Clen smiled and remarked that they had underestimated him. Then, in an instant, he leapt from where he stood straight upward, smashing through the ceiling of Nei's room. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she realized he had just destroyed her roof. Outside, a lake within Salcian came into view, and a black shadow circled around it, encircling the lone tree that stood at its center. From the chapel, as the headmaster stepped outside, he stared in confusion, wondering aloud what it could be. Before his eyes, a tall, tower-like structure began to materialize at the center of the lake. From atop a tall tree, Guard also noticed it, as did students like Andrew and Ray from their rooms. Sarasa caught sight of it as well and immediately recognized it as the work of Clevatess, though she still couldn't believe it. Rod, on the other hand, found himself intrigued by the spectacle. A black tower had suddenly emerged from the location of the lone tree at the center of the lake, and it was indeed the doing of Clen. Standing at the ominous structure, Clen declared that what they were looking for was right there. Holding out the Book of Toa, he announced that if they wanted it, then they should come to him and take it. As Clevatess shouted those words, we were then shown Mary taking a bath, and after she poured the bucket of water she was holding over her head, she suddenly heard Clevatess's voice, which caught her attention. She then wondered to herself what the voice she just heard was and where it was coming from. Meanwhile, at the boys' dormitory, Ray and Andrew climbed up to the rooftop to check where the voice came from. When they saw the black tower that Clevatess had manifested, Andrew said that the voice came from there, and he wondered what that tower they were seeing was. Ray pointed out to him that it was him, which left Andrew confused. Ray then raised his hand bearing the rune and revealed that it was throbbing and shaking. He explained that this throbbing sensation hadn't gone away ever since the first time he laid his eyes on Kren, so he deduced that it was most likely that guy who caused it. After that, we were briefly shown Clint's grinning face back when his eyes met Ray's, and then we cut to Edison, who was asleep. Not long after, Laswell appeared once again in his head and spoke to Clevatess, calling him Southerner, and pointed out that it seemed like he had started something interesting. The Bluey twins also witnessed this event from their room, and meanwhile, Sean immediately went to Burns to inform him that something suddenly appeared in the middle of the pond southeast of their position. While staring out the window, Burns replied that he was already looking at it, almost calling him Mr. Mikkel, but quickly correcting himself to Mr. Sean. Burns then pointed out that first, they had the voice they heard earlier, and now, what exactly was this thing they were seeing? Meanwhile, on the students' side, they poured out of their dorms and gathered to see what was happening outside. When they saw the tower Clint had erected, they wondered what it was and pointed out that it wasn't there that morning. One of them urged his classmate to go check it out up close, but the classmate quickly said hell no. A male student then asked if this might be one of those trial things used to obtain a rune, to which a female student responded in disbelief, saying no way. Someone then wondered aloud if that meant everyone present here right now was part of that trial, to which another responded that they didn't know. Another explained that those who participated in those trials either remembered nothing or ended up going insane, which alarmed one student, who fearfully muttered that they were talentless anyway. Suddenly, a new voice rang out, uttering the word silence, sending chills down their spines. The voice introduced itself as Chancellor Elro Romaine and urged the students and staff to remain calm. He made an excuse, claiming that this was merely a drill, and when the students were surprised by that, he clarified that yes, this was training to prepare them for unpredictable situations. He then declared that those who could not resist his voice should return to their rooms immediately, shut their doors, and fall into a deep sleep. As he uttered those words, something seemed to activate deep within the students, their demeanor shifting and the color of their eyes turning pink, as if they had become mindless zombies who immediately obeyed Romaine's command. The students began walking back into their dorms, and as this happened, we were shown Sean clutching his head in pain, which greatly alarmed Burns, prompting him to call him by his real name and ask if he was okay. Mikkel replied that he was fine, calling Burns captain, and explained that for a brief moment, he felt like he was losing consciousness, but now he was fine. He brushed it off afterward, saying that it was definitely the Chancellor's voice they heard earlier and urged Burns to move quickly. He added that he didn't know why, but it seemed like something was wrong, and stressed that they couldn't let this chance slip away. Rod agreed with him, saying that just by looking at that tower, they could tell something had already been set in motion, and now was the time to investigate. Outside, after Romaine had sent back those who couldn't resist his voice, he addressed the remaining students, the ones capable of resisting it and staying conscious, the talented ones, and ordered them to gather at the main school building. There, we saw that the class's top 3 was among them, along with several other individuals. After that, he simply said that was all and closed the book of Toa he was holding. Rob then approached him at the balcony where he stood, nervously calling out to him and asking if he thought it was wise for them to make their move now. He admitted that he knew this was an emergency, but pointed out that several spies still seemed to be at large in this situation. The Chancellor replied that no matter how many spies there were, they were powerless before the book he possessed. However, he also acknowledged that this wasn't enough. He added that they couldn't allow something so filthy and foreign to desecrate the holy grounds of Salsian Seminary, known as the Town of Origin. Romaine's appearance then began to twist into something inhuman, and with pure fury, he declared that it was absolutely unforgivable. He added that it was blasphemy toward the book, but then corrected himself. No, it was blasphemy toward God. This terrifying expression gave Rob a deeply uneasy and disturbed feeling. Rob commented to himself how terrifying Romaine was, and that this was the very first time he had ever seen the Chancellor so furious. Afterward, Romaine ordered Rob to inform the guards at the outer gate not to interfere with anything that might happen, and to tell them this was the will of God, prompting Rob to anxiously obey. Once Rob left, Romaine fell silent, and it seemed as though his entire face began peeling and was on the verge of coming off, prompting him to quickly hold it in place and nervously mutter that it almost came off. He swiftly adjusted it, molding it back onto his face so it wouldn't fall off, and then decided to proceed with acquiring the book. When he turned toward the shadow tower Clen had created, he noticed mist beginning to form around it. After that, we shifted to Clen's side as the mist surrounded his tower. He scoffed, thinking this was most likely Zaftir's doing. Not long after, Sarasa arrived in her Zaftir form, riding Gart as they swiftly flew toward him. Zaftir then jumped down and landed beside him, prompting Clen to ask why she came here, to which Zaftir clarified that it wasn't about that. As Gart landed, Clen greeted him with a long time no see and asked if this was their first time meeting face-to-face since the Shaft of Elba, to which Gart said that back then, Clen had lied about being a vassal, and he almost believed it. Clen responded that it was because he had no obligation to reveal his true nature to strangers. Gart scoffed at that, while Zaftir pointed out that more importantly, she wanted to know what he was thinking when he conjured this tower. She said he deliberately made himself stand out, and even went so far as to taunt them, to which Clen replied that all of this had simply become too much of a hassle, sneaking around and searching for something hidden. Zaftir then pointed out that originally, he had another purpose in mind when he changed into human form. She thought he had decided to use that form to watch over the growth of the human infant, Luna, and asked if he truly wanted the others to know his real identity here and now, which irritated Clen, prompting him to ask how she knew about that. Zaftir answered that if he didn't want her to know, then he shouldn't talk near trees, which caused him to click his tongue in frustration. Zaftir then added that even she had no idea what exactly he expected from that child. She explained that since the extinction of heroes until now, the entire time from when Clen was born up until today had been a lost millennium. The only thing they had left was their role as Devil Beast Kings, and they had felt nothing but emptiness from the loss of that purpose. She said that until Clen met the baby, his world must have been nothing but ashen gray. After all, she added that she felt the same way, being a survivor of the war from 1,000 years ago. She pointed out that living for basically an eternity without having any purpose was nothing but agony. However, thanks to a single chance encounter, he had found purpose. By their metrics, the time it takes for a baby to grow up is extremely short, but even so, it still gave him a definite purpose. Zaftir then noted that now he seemed much fuller of liveliness, which made Clen ask what exactly she was implying, calling her a shitty old hag. In response, Zaftir told him not to lose sight of his purpose. She told him that he ought to watch over that child in his current form and informed him that it would be unwise to let it be known that Clen, the youth from Haydn, was actually Clevatess. Clen responded that he didn't need Zaftir's 2 cents on the matter, adding that he had no intention of disclosing his true identity any more than this. Zaftir then asked why. In that case, he made himself stand out so much, to which he replied that it was because he had 2 aims. The first, he said, was as he had already mentioned. Searching for it had become too much trouble, so he was luring it with bait. Zaftir then asked him what the second was. Clen explained that it was to shake things up, to create a situation where it would be easier for his servant to escape. Judging from the circumstances, his servant was likely trapped somewhere inside a special dimension they couldn't see or touch from where they stood, and he assumed it was probably some kind of sorcery from Toa. He added that as long as he created an opening for her, she could at least crawl her way out of it on her own. After all, she was still the only hero who had ever reached him. Zaftir replied that she understood, adding that now she was genuinely interested in witnessing what new developments would come, especially where Clen's encounter with the baby and the hero Alicia would lead. She added that a millennium had passed since the death of their last true hero until today, and she wondered aloud how the emptiness left by that loss would be affected, to which Clen coldly replied, "Suit yourself." Zaftir then thought to herself that, in all likelihood, Vortian's motivations probably had something to do with that loss 1,000 years ago as well, and she wondered which of them was truly justified. Clen then asked why she had sent out such an overwhelming amount of mist. Zaftir explained that it was probably because he had allocated a large portion of his power to conjuring this kind of tower outside his domain, so what she sent was only minor support. She added that it was difficult to proceed through the mist without getting lost. Considering the burden it placed on her oracle, she admitted she couldn't do more than this, but at the very least, this way they should be able to avoid fighting all of them at once. She added that, for her part, She wanted to keep the number of student casualties to an absolute minimum. Clem pointed out that, as usual, she favored the hominids, to which Zaftir simply replied that this was who she was now. Afterward, while riding on Gart's back, Zaftir told him to do his best to draw the enemy's attention and serve as a decoy until the hero Alicia returned, calling him Clevatess, while she herself would descend and focus on maintaining the mist. She then signaled Gart, who immediately responded and flew off at high speed, leaving Clevatess scoffing at her as he watched. He remarked that even with wings, she couldn't even fly on her own, concluding that it must mean she was pushing herself to the limit. He added that, well, he wouldn't last so long himself either. After that, he looked off into the distance and told Alicia to hurry up and break free. In the next scene, we transition between two dimensions, hearing Alicia's heavy breathing from inside Andrew's basement. Suddenly, the focus shifted to the main building, where the elite students of Salsian had already gathered. All of them were dressed in their uniforms and were merely waiting for Romain to speak. Romain told them it was good they had assembled here and pointed out that they were the pride of their school, nascent young wizards. He added that he believed they had grasped the situation to some extent. The black tower that appeared southeast of their school building, he said, was likely a trial in a certain sense. It was something that shouldn't even exist on holy ground, and he declared they should consider it filth, and filth must always be cleansed. He then stated that he had already determined the culprits responsible for its appearance. They were the foreign exchange students from Haydn, Clenbardis, and Elisislayat. He told the students that they had stolen one of Salsian's holy books from their treasury and foolishly undid the seal placed upon it, which resulted in the emergence of such a tower. He declared that the evil deeds of those two were absolutely unforgivable, and they must retrieve the book and punish them. And if there were others allied with them, they, too, must be eliminated. Bluntly and firmly, he stated that whether those culprits lived or died was no longer of any importance. After that, he declared that those who served as the hands of justice would be granted further blessings by God. The students began to raise their hands bearing their runes, which simultaneously glowed. Amidst this sight, Nay, standing at the back, was visibly anxious and nervous, thinking to herself that the situation had completely gone nuts. Once he finished speaking, Romain ordered them to lift their runes higher. He told them that the individual he spoke of would now infuse them with power. Suddenly, a mirrored wall appeared behind the Chancellor, immediately catching Nay's attention, who recognized it as the very same mirror she had seen before. Romain stepped away from the mirror and stood to the side, wearing a twisted grin on his face as he wished for them to be blessed by God. Inside the mirror, Vordain began to appear, peering out at the gathered students. He prepared his mouth and gathered flames, declaring that he would bestow upon these nascent ones his power. As he said this, he unleashed a fiery breath. However, once it passed through the mirror, the flames transformed into golden mist, which dispersed into each of the students' runes. As the mist infused their runes, their glow intensified. When Ray opened his eyes, his irises took on the same glow as their runes, with triangular pupils radiating a golden hue. They all rose ominously as their glowing eyes continued to shine. Outside the main building, Rod sensed the extraordinary aura emanating from within, commenting that it was the same presence he had felt on the very first day. Back inside, Nay clutched her forehead, feeling the surge of power within her magic crystal. Face suddenly called out to her, snapping her out of her thoughts. She replied in surprise, and Face reminded her that this wasn't the time to space out. It was their duty as teachers to guide the students, and those among them with combat experience had to lead the charge. Nay hesitantly agreed, but remained confused within her mind. As the two teachers began to walk out of the building, Romain called out Ray's full name, prompting him to turn around. He told Ray that the time had come for him to prove his worth, and all the limits placed upon him would now be removed. He didn't care what Ray destroyed, and urged him to become as wild as he wished. If he managed to defeat Clen and retrieve the book, Romain promised he would be recognized as General Doral's official successor and granted full rights to the secret chamber. He then asked if wasn't that Ray's goal. Ray closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them again, a greenish-blue aura radiated from his body as he answered with a firm yes. Following this, the students began marching out of the building. Romain laughed and commented that no matter how many of them fell, As long as they secured the Book of the Furnace, everything would be worth it. Suddenly remembering something, he called out to Andrew, catching his attention. As Andrew approached, Romain said he had a special task for him. He recalled that Andrew had captured a mouse a few days earlier, if he wasn't mistaken, to which Andrew confirmed. Romain then asked if the mouse was still alive. Andrew replied that the flowers were still red, so yes, it was still alive. Upon hearing this, Romain ordered him to kill it immediately, confusing Andrew. Romain then explained that the creature was the seed of calamity. If Andrew didn't kill it, he warned, it would undoubtedly become a thorn in their side. As he said this, the scene shifted to show Alicia's bloodied hand emerging from a nest of thorns. After showing us that, we are brought to a ventilated storage box placed on a shelf alongside various exotic plants, and inside it, we see the nest of thorns wrapped tightly around Alicia. While unable to move, Alicia remarked in her thoughts that she had been racking her brain endlessly, trying to come up with any possible way to escape this glass cage. It then showed us her efforts to get out while she explained that because she had shrunk and no longer had her sword, she couldn't escape from this container. She tried again and again to break free, but she said it was useless. She added that the glass cage had an iron mesh ceiling, but even that, she couldn't break through to escape. She pointed out that she was completely lacking in physical strength, which led her to wonder what exactly she was supposed to do here. While thinking about this, she noticed that the bug-eating plant inside the cage with her didn't actually consume using its fang-lined petals, something she figured out through close observation. She pointed out that the hairs inside were responsible, explaining that those countless hairs inside the petals directly drain nutrients from the paralyzed bugs. She added that these hairs also grew throughout the entire stalks. She said she cut her own wrist, provoked the plant to attack, and allowed herself to get caught. When that happened, she ended up in the current situation she was in now. She then explained that as the plant drained nutrients from her, it rapidly grew bigger and bigger. The reason she allowed this, she said, was because during her travels, she had seen old buildings that were engulfed by plants and destroyed. She wondered if this plant she was with might also possess a similar power. She noticed that the cage was already close to bursting, yet she was still very much alive. She said it hadn't even drained a fraction of the devil beast king ichor running through her body. In her mind, she urged it to keep sucking and growing, saying she didn't care if it ended up squashing her since she can't die anyway. The plant gradually grew, and as it did, her face showed the damage and pain she was receiving as she was slowly being crushed. But she pushed it to show her what it's made of. Moments later, the plant touched the iron mesh ceiling of the glass cage, and before long, it broke entirely, unable to withstand the plant's rapid growth. The entire iron mesh fell apart, and Alicia immediately freed herself from the thorns binding her. She pulled her arms out, and though weakened, she crawled away from them. While panting heavily, she commented that somehow she had managed to escape. Suddenly, she felt pain in her side, causing her to grunt and clutch the area. She realized that she had 5 or 6 ribs broken and explained that while she remained undying, there was no hope of her wounds healing in her current condition. She thought it might be because she had lost contact with Clen and she needed to get out of this world as soon as possible to find him. When she turned to look at the bug-eating plant, she noticed it had frozen up now that she had cut off its nourishment, and she thought it wasn't chasing her anymore, possibly as a side effect of its rapid growth. She brushed it off and began climbing down the shelf, saying she needed to leave this place before it started moving again. As she descended to the lower part of the shelf, she stared at the various terrifying and twisted plants around her, commenting that this scenery was likely different from the real world. She added that this room was lit by an ever-burning lamp, so she guessed this must be where Andrew stored the rare plants he had collected. She added that this place was probably used to grow varieties he couldn't openly raise, such as carnivorous and poisonous ones. She further added that, well, things like these shouldn't be brought to school in the first place. She then brushed off the thought, and while leaping down the shelves, she commented that it was perilous being here while she was so small. No one could tell what might suddenly emerge, and as of now, she was nothing more than a tiny animal in Andrew's eyes, even if he did realize who she truly was. After that, she added that besides, The rules of this place stated that it was permitted to hunt down and cull students who had transformed into devil beasts. As she was running, she noticed something on her left that caught her attention, so she approached it. She realized it was a ladder, and when she looked up to see where it led, she saw light at the end, which made her think it was probably the exit. Despite her small size and the height she had to climb, she did so, and soon she reached the top of the ladder. Upon emerging from Andrew's cellar, she gasped for breath from exhaustion and commented that somehow she managed to escape. Afterward, she leapt from one chair to a table. When she reached the top of it, she commented that perhaps because her form was that of a mouse in reality, her body felt lighter, making climbing easier for her. Next, she jumped to the window beside her and examined her reflection. While doing so, she commented that she had been right about the mouse-like reflection in the glass after all, and judging from the scenery and colors, reality was reflected in glass. She touched it and added that she needed to find a way to return to her original world. Then she noticed something unusual in her reflection. Her tail seemed swollen and enlarged. This made her wonder if her tail's swelling was really this big, and when she turned to look, she saw the glowing white snail again. As she stared at it, we were shown that in the another dimension, a gecko was watching her from the ceiling corner. Alicia realized this was the same snail she had seen before entering this world and, shocked, wondered aloud, what in the blazes is this? Unexpectedly, the snail responded, calling it a sign and calling her stupid. The snail then stood upright and began to transform. It grew larger, gradually taking the form of Alicia before she lost any parts of her body and when she was still whole. After transforming, it stared at her and remarked how tiny she was, referring to her as itself. Completely bewildered, Alicia realized it was herself before losing her eye. The giant Alicia mockingly swore to God that she was pitifully small and said that was the kind of person she really was. It added that all she deserves a tiny life of sneaking about and hiding in the shadows. Shocked and confused, Alicia asked why this was happening and what exactly was going on, to which the giant Alicia replied that she had always been this way. She had always been like this, secretive about hiding her true identity when she became a hero, despite the fact that their father remained unavenged. It added that even when Alicia was chosen as one of the 13 heroes, she never revealed who she truly was to anyone. She even tried to make herself seem as small as possible, which is why she called herself Alicia of Sogo Village, never once daring to mention their father's surname. It then pointed out that if she had, everyone would have known she was the Sword Saint's daughter, and rumors would have spread and reached the ears of who she called you-know-who. Sarcastically, it asked if she meant their father's former senior fellow disciple, the man who claimed the ultimate treasure meant for their father, but instead of becoming a hero, ended up as a general in a foreign country. The giant Alicia's eyes suddenly gleamed menacingly as it pointed out to Alicia that she knew full well there was no way she could possibly win, and that's why she chose to keep running. Alicia shouted back in denial, saying that wasn't true, but before she could react, the giant Alicia punched her hard, shattering the window and sending her flying out of it. The impact was brutal, and her body flew and slammed into the branch of a tree. She then fell off, landing shoulder first, an impact that no doubt caused significant damage to her body. As soon as she lifted her head, the giant Alicia immediately leapt down in front of her. Mocking her, it pitted her as a tiny, pitiful thing, questioning her with a glare as to why she was so small. It added that just looking at her made it sick to its stomach, and then questioned whether that was really what people called a hero. After that, the giant Alicia prepared to stomp on her, and added that heroes were supposed to be far greater than her. Its foot slammed down on her like she was an insect, crushing her and breaking her left arm, which made her scream out in agony. The giant Alicia began laughing after doing so, mocking her by saying at least her scream was big, while Alicia struggled, wondering what was happening and what this was. She questioned why another version of herself had appeared here. The giant Alicia then asked her what she thought was the reason she had shrunk so much, pointing out that it was because her grand ideals were incompatible with who she really was. Didn't she always declare that she wanted to become a hero, defeat the 4 evil kings, and then eventually expand the world? Her larger self ridiculed her, asking how she planned to do that. Giant Alicia then pointed out that after losing horribly to the first Devil Beast King, she should have realized it already, but quickly brushed that off and said that if she didn't even stand a chance against a mere man like Doral, why would she challenge a Devil Beast King? And was she stupid? It added mockingly. After that, the giant Alicia kicked her hard, sending her flying once more while pointing out that she should know her place. It said the reason why she's such a tiny person was because she dreamt of things that are forever beyond her grasp. Alicia lay there on the ground, listening, but soon, despite her pain, she struggled to lift herself up, commenting that she truly was small. She questioned the idea of her defeating the 4 Devil Beast Kings, pointing out that there was no way she could do it. It was impossible even if the world were turned upside down. She admitted she realized that after facing one Devil Beast King, so expanding the world was a dream beyond a dream. The giant Alicia responded that at least she understood that much. But unexpectedly, Alicia added with a determined look that even so, she had gained something from that battle against the Devil Beast King, something she never would have obtained otherwise, the method for expanding the world. The giant Alicia ridiculed her again, questioning what she meant by that, to which Alicia replied that she was herself, pointing out that the giant Alicia was her before she died, which meant naturally, it wouldn't know about it. The giant Alicia prepared to stomp on her again, saying her words were nonsense, and soon stomped down hard. However, to its shock, Alicia managed to stop it with her arms. As she held her ground, she commented that she was right and figured that might just be the case. The giant Alicia then asked why she was so strong despite her small size, to which Alicia answered it's been itching around her bottom this whole time, pointing out that the more punishment she took, the worse it grows. She said that surely this must be the trial the students talked about, and thought that she was awakening to a new ability. She added that it swells according to the pain she receives, and that's the sort of power it is. As she explained, a rune appeared on the tail of her Devil Beast form, continuing to grow larger. She then said that thanks to her past self, she had noticed the little flame smoldering within her. The giant Alicia didn't hold back and swung a punch at her, screaming about her insolence. But Alicia easily dodged it by leaping into the air, and while airborne, she agreed, saying she had indeed been killed by the Devil Beast King and was reanimated by his power as his undying slave. Now, she said, she could never defy him. At any moment, depending on his mood, she could be turned back into a corpse. Her tail continued swelling and growing larger, catching the attention of the giant Alicia, whose face now showed unease. A matching rune appeared on Alicia's right hand, and the power stored in her tail began transferring into her fist. As this happened, she added that this was what that Devil Beast King had told someone like her. He never once ordered her to stop being a hero. Alicia prepared her empowered fist and hurled it with full force at the giant Alicia, the blow striking squarely on its cheek, creating a yellow crescent-shaped projectile and shattering its entire lower jaw. She then remarked that it was a funny story, but that one statement had broadened her world. Even so, she said she was the one continuing to tell the tale about expanding the world. Afterward, the giant Alicia's body began disintegrating, reverting back into a snail. Before it could even hit the ground, it fully transformed back, leaving only its shell behind. After that, Alicia caught her breath and looked at her right hand. Seeing the rune, she commented that she couldn't believe she even had a talent for magic. However, it soon disappeared, though she didn't seem particularly fazed by it. She simply laughed, thinking she'd rub it in Clen's face for making fun of her. Suddenly, a voice spoke, saying that wasn't just magic, surprising her and snapping her attention toward it. She recognized the voice and couldn't believe she was hearing Doral. The voice added that what had appeared on her hand was called by everyone runes, but in the ancient tongue, they were referred to as skills, and that one could have up to 2 skills. Right after that, a massive mirror appeared behind Alicia, shocking and confusing her even more about what was happening. The voice then explained that she could pass through it, and afterward, she would receive a skill, but she would forget everything that was said and everything she'd seen in this place. Alicia questioned the voice's claim that passing through this mirror would grant her a skill, but at the cost of forgetting everything in this place. The voice then explained to her that skills open the way to magic that doesn't rely on magicite. Through formulas and chanting, individuals with skills gain limitless possibilities in magic. Alicia remarked that the voice really did sound like Doral, but there was something off about it, and besides, he should have died back then. Even so, she admitted what it was saying had significance. She added that maybe Nathan's fate, along with the other students who had runes, was decided based on whether they chose to pass through this mirror or not. Afterward, she pointed out that she had overcome the trial, so she should be able to pass through. By doing so, she said she would finally be able to meet Clen. She stared into her shadow-like reflection, and soon, the voice urged her to pass through. However, she didn't move and simply stood there in front of the mirror, prompting the voice to ask why she wasn't stepping through yet. She explained that, well, she would lose her memories if she did, and that was a serious issue. She added that, besides, she could sense this was some kind of trap, and pointed out that the voice gave off an awfully unsettling aura. When Alicia pointed this out, her reflection suddenly shifted, and a massive hand burst out of the mirror, reaching for her. In response, she muttered that she was right, while quickly dodging the hand's attempt to grab her. Soon after, the entire body of the hand emerged from the mirror, clad in a familiar-looking outfit, the same as the Chancellor's. With glowing red eyes and a menacing presence, it asked her how she knew it was a trap. Alicia mockingly replied, asking if he really thought she would believe her enemy was foolish enough to give her the chance to gain power and just let her go free. Following it up with a sarcastic, "Yeah right, Chancellor," which visibly irritated him. She also pointed out that she had already predicted the Chancellor possessed one of the books of Toa, likely the one connected to the second passage, the Town of Origin, and that he was using its power to control the dimension she was in. She added that he was the one who prepared the secret chamber for Doral, and that standing behind him was Vordian, the Devil Beast King of the North. Shock and surprise flashed in the Chancellor's eyes upon hearing all this, which Alicia noticed, prompting her to remark that she was dead on after all. She then taunted him, saying that next time he tries deceiving someone, he should first remove the cocoonish heavy makeup-like odor. Annoyed, the Chancellor lunged for her again, but she swiftly dodged and began leaping between nearby trees to reach higher ground. While airborne, she teased him, asking if he really thought he could catch her, pointing out how agile she was in her current state. The Chancellor looked up at her in silence, then suddenly vanished without warning. Alicia was taken aback, remarking that she was certain he'd try to chase her for a while, but when he didn't, she simply brushed it off. She then explained that for a brief moment, she managed to see what was on the other side of that mirror, a world she called the Red World. The view shifted closer to the mirror, revealing several red-eyed figures lined up along the edges of a walkway. Next, their appearance was shown, robed in crimson, cult-like attire, standing in what seemed to be a hall bathed entirely in red. Alicia commented that this was probably Doral's secret chamber. She also mentioned that the mirror world might have more than one layer. Still leaping from tree to tree, she spotted a humanoid monster up ahead. Before she could even land on the next branch, the creature, already lying in wait, jumped at her mid-leap. When she turned to look, she was shocked to recognize it was Andrew. In another dimension, the real world, Andrew was shown capturing her with both hands, his gaze locked on her. Alarmed, Alicia cursed under her breath, while Andrew coldly muttered "Gotcha." After Andrew caught Alicia, the scene shifted to Chancellor Elro Romaine, who closed the Book of Toa in his hands and remarked that he never expected Alicia to overcome the trial or escape him. However, with a self-satisfied laugh, he added that he still had her in the palm of his hand. He also commented that sending Andrew in was indeed the correct decision. He further explained that this guy was merciless toward everything except plants, so he presumed Andrew would carry out his mission without a hitch. We then returned to Alicia's situation, still in Andrew's grip, as he coldly told her that the Chancellor had ordered him to kill her immediately, so there should be no hard feelings. Alicia, distressed, cursed in her thoughts, realizing she couldn't muster any strength, likely because she had used it all up earlier. Meanwhile, amid the thick mist and wooded path leading to Clen's conjured tower, we saw the elite students, referred to by the Chancellor as nascent young wizards, moving swiftly toward the tower. Among them was Mr. Face, who ordered them to split into 3 groups. Group A would travel along the road, Group B would take a roundabout path through the forest, and Group C would continue straight ahead. Miss Chiffonlitz would lead Group A, with Mary Merriweather as her assistant. They were reminded to check whether the houses along the road had been evacuated as they advanced. For Group B, Ray Forrester would take command. He added that they would serve as the main attack force, bringing the strongest students to cut through the forest and ambush the enemy from behind the lake. As for Group C, which he himself would lead, he explained that they would form a ranged formation, launch a frontal assault, and distract the enemy while carefully observing its movements. As they proceeded, Mr. Face cautioned them that if their current opponent, Clen Bardis, truly possessed the Holy Book, a precious relic of Toa, then his power must be beyond measure. He also stated that the very fact Clen could even hold it proved he was a monster. While all of this is happening, we were shown Nay, who's visibly uncomfortable, while Mr. Face revealed that he had once touched the book as part of his research, and it burned half of his body. As he said this, he glanced at his right hand, now scarred with a large wound, his face silent yet filled with bitterness. He then added that even if they found the book, they mustn't touch it, and should keep in mind that their enemy was formidable. He emphasized that this would be the students' first real taste of battle, and no matter what happened, they had to survive and prevail. Mr. Face prepared himself, pulling out his wand and declaring that he would initiate the attack first. He uttered the incantations tripartite casting, range sniping formula, Sinal, Ostrin, Felra, as he traced 3 different shapes for each word, stacking them atop one another. The result produced a thin, laser-like projectile that shot rapidly toward the top of the Shadow Tower. It struck directly at Clen, but vanished upon contact with an invisible force field. Clen merely smirked after taking the hit without issue, staring down at Mr. Face and the students. One of the students, impressed, commented that his display was remarkable and expected of a teacher, while another, a pink-haired girl, noted this was her first time seeing tripartite casting. Mr. Face responded, explaining that if they mastered this style, the use of a wand was powerful even without a rune or crystal. He added that it was probably the most flexible and versatile type of magic they currently had. He then revealed that he had dedicated his life to developing the wand style and advised the students to make good use of the unique individual nature of their runes when fighting. The 5 students raised their hands showing their runes, all agreeing in unison with their teacher. Up on the tower, Clen scoffed at them and remarked that he thought it was worth eliminating at least a few of them. He then extended one of his tails, from which several shadowy drops began to fall. As they hit the ground, he chanted the words "Summon Minions." Upon hitting the ground, the drops gradually formed into creatures, eventually creating a pack of monstrous shadow wolves. He then commanded them to go forth, calling them his Shadow Vanguard. Clen explained that he had no business with anyone there except Vordian, so those wolves were to decimate the rest. The Shadow Vanguards immediately followed his command as Clen calmly watched them move. Elsewhere in the forest near the tower, Sarasa was observing the situation. Panting heavily, she spoke to Lady Zaftir within her, saying that it had already begun, to which Zaftir agreed. Zaftir then told Sarasa that no one else should know her true identity, instructing her to rest and recover at a safe place to maintain the mist. Sarasa complied and started moving away, while Zaftir added that preferably, she should rest somewhere with something good to eat, which Sarasa quickly agreed to. Soon after, Sarasa had distanced herself from Clen's tower, and the scene shifted back to Alicia, still in Andrew's grasp. As Andrew examined her devil beast body in the real world, he wondered how that mouse was still alive. Alicia was shocked when she suddenly began to understand Andrew's words within the trial dimension, and she wondered if it was because she had overcome the trial. Meanwhile, Andrew commented that he thought she was being used as a seedbed for his unusual rose variant plant. Having an idea, Alicia suddenly shouted and tried to speak to Andrew, but in the real world, all Andrew could hear were squeaks. Perplexed, he wondered why she had suddenly started squeaking. He muttered in disgust, calling her gross, while Alicia began to be irritated. In her mind, she remarked that her struggle was useless. With no other choice, Alicia bit Andrew's hand, forcing him to release her. As she landed on the ground, She remarked that she didn't want to fight someone she knew was also a student. She immediately ran as fast as she could, thinking that it would be better to escape. She planned to position herself behind him, aiming for his blind spot. Already used to running on 4 legs, she thought that if he couldn't see her, he probably wouldn't follow her. However, as she looked back, Andrew began chanting the words Vuelos Ethurios, startling her and making her anxious, finding it hard to believe he was chanting. After Andrew's chant, roots nearby suddenly sprouted and quickly wrapped around Alicia's body, stopping her from running. The roots constricted her tightly, choking her and making her struggle to breathe. Andrew heard the cracking of bones and turned to look, commenting that there she was. Activating his rune, he praised her speed, which caught Alicia's attention, prompting her to wonder if this was also the rune's power. Andrew then began explaining that runes varied individually from person to person and that most people just gave them random names. He added that usually they chose something straightforward or words they'd read in a book. He then revealed his rune to Alicia. His left eye changed to resemble Ray's, and he told her that he called his rune Garden Words. He explained that it granted him the power to hear the voices of plants and lead them. Using Garden Words along with a spell formula to accelerate growth, his magic was perfect. He then thought that there was no point in explaining this to a mouse that was about to die anyway, but he realized that perhaps she wasn't just an ordinary mouse. He explained that the tree coiling around her belonged to the fig family, sometimes called the strangler fig. He had spread its seeds throughout the area in advance, instructing them to suddenly grow when they spotted the target. He also pointed out that its squeezing force was far stronger than that of the rose variant. Meanwhile, Alicia, struggling and in pain, thought to herself how tight the tree's grip was, but recalling the power she possessed through the rune, she believed the steady damage might give her another chance to use that power. Andrew then pulled out a large pair of scissors, catching her attention. As he raised it, he admitted he had been thinking about it, but still didn't understand how she broke free of the rose variant's cage, wondering if she had used some sort of ability. He noted that the variant had grown abnormally and weakened, so he thought it would be a bad idea to just passively watch. Opening the scissors and bringing them close to Alicia's neck, he said it would probably be less trouble to just cut her head off right there. He then asked if she knew that plants and flowers grow more when cut. Meanwhile, Alicia, panicking, pleaded internally for a moment. She questioned what would happen if her head were cut off. Would she still be unable to die even then? But she countered her own thought. Clem had said she would die if all her devil ichor were spilled. If her head were cut off, she'd likely die from blood loss. Cursing internally, she thought she couldn't die in a place like this. She also couldn't believe this guy wouldn't hesitate to decapitate a small animal. As the blades of the scissors dug into her neck, she thought struggling would be useless and resigned herself to death, closing her eyes to accept it. However, Andrew suddenly stopped tightening the scissors, surprising Alicia. She opened her eyes and stared at him in confusion as Andrew turned to his right. Listening to the seedlings he had planted, Andrew heard them whispering about a tall man approaching. Andrew wondered who that man was after, himself or the mouse. Deciding to be on guard for whatever was coming, he prepared himself. Alicia, meanwhile, wondered if someone was coming, though she couldn't see anything. Soon, another figure appeared. Unlike Andrew's undead-like appearance in the trial dimension, this one was a humanoid shape made of solid mist. Alicia questioned who it could be. Andrew muttered that he had been wondering who it was and now realized. It turned out to be Mr. Matthew Burns, also known as Rod, who had arrived. He addressed Andrew, asking if he could pardon him and allow him to ask 2 or 3 questions. In the following scene, we are introduced to who Rod Royce truly is. He is said to be a descendant of the hero Randall Royce, who became a hero by saving a town from a group of devil beasts. It was also explained here that Randall's ultimate treasure, called Snowflower, is said to reject the touch of anyone who's unworthy. In fact, the second-generation head of the family froze up to his shoulder when he tried to touch it and had to have his arm cut off. From then on, it was added that the spear was displayed in a high place in the parlor as a family heirloom so that no one would touch it. Afterward, it was explained that at the age of 8, Rod had reached out for the spear. It had been suspended from a chain in the parlor so that no one would touch it, but it fell due to the chain's deterioration. It was further added that, in Rod's eyes, it seemed as if the spear was calling out to him, which made him decide to grasp it. The moment he tried to touch it, he was attacked by a cold energy strong enough to freeze the entire parlor. He felt his extended left arm freezing, yet his eyes remained fixed on the spear as he firmly gripped it with the right hand of his other arm. It was noted that there was no hesitation or fear in Rod's eyes as he did this, and his unyielding determination forced the spear into submission. In this manner, Rod Royce became the legitimate possessor of the ultimate treasure Snowflower, upon whose shoulders rested the honor of the Royce family and the hope of the people of his domain. After this explanation, we return to the present where Andrew asks Rod what he wished to ask, addressing him as Mr. Burns. Just as Rod was about to ask what he wanted to know, Alicia's devil beast form caught his attention, prompting him to say, but first. Before he could even ask if the mouse he was seeing was a devil beast, Andrew immediately answered yes, while Alicia continued to shout and desperately try to make them understand her. Rod then asked why Andrew had trapped it in that tree, to which Andrew replied that it wasn't what he came here to discuss. Andrew went on to explain that currently, the Chancellor had placed a spell over the entirety of Salcian. He pointed out that an ordinary person without a crystal or rune would simply go back to their room and fall asleep, or be in a condition where they could hardly even stand. And yet, he added, here Rod was, standing and speaking normally, which must meant he either possessed extraordinary magic resistance or mental fortitude strong enough to exceed the compelling force of the spell. Hearing this, Rod fell silent and thought to himself that there truly must have been magic in the Chancellor's voice when he and Mikkel heard it back then. Andrew then pointed out to him that he was stepping on flowers while calling him teacher, which made him panic, realizing he had done so unintentionally. But when Rod looked down, he was confused to see nothing there and asked if there really were flowers. Andrew explained that he simply couldn't see them. They were moss flowers. Andrew also explained to him, while showing his rune, that it allowed him to converse with plants, and that they had told him about Rod's gait and weight. He added that without a doubt, it was a powerful gait he sensed. Andrew then began to grow skeptical of him, and stated that Rod wasn't really a teacher at all, but most likely a soldier, an exceptionally tough one at that. This caught Rod's attention, and Andrew added that, in fact, he had already realized this about him since the very first day he had been appointed here. He simply hadn't paid any mind to it since then because he was completely uninterested in that sort of thing. Rod, in his thoughts, commented on how incredible Andrew was and wondered if this was the power of a rune-bearing student. He then thought it might be a bad idea to try hiding anything from this kid or lying to him. He also realized that even though Andrew had been aware of his true nature, he had chosen to ignore it, which meant that, rather than serving as a pawn of the Chancellor and the others, he had simply refused to get involved. Because of this, Rod decided to avoid coming off as hostile and thought it best to leave without getting involved. After that, he apologized to Andrew for disturbing him and explained that he just happened to be looking for a student who had suddenly gone missing. He then explained that, as Andrew had said, he was a former soldier, but added that he had no sword and no intention of fighting. He further stated that if Andrew insisted he knew nothing about the missing student, then he would simply turn back. Andrew quietly stared at him after hearing this, wondering to himself how that student would react. From Alicia's side, she muttered in disbelief if she heard correctly that Rod had just said he was going to turn back. She then questioned if that man was really Rod Royce of Eslan, and commented that just when someone who could help had finally appeared. She repeatedly tried to get his attention, shouting for him to notice her and saying that the student he was looking for was right there. Andrew then calmly told Rod that he didn't know a thing about it, and followed up by saying he wasn't interested in it either. From Alicia's side, she continued desperately screaming to get Rod's attention, but in the real world, all Rod heard were squeaking sounds coming from her. He then told Andrew he understood and would try asking elsewhere. As she stared at Andrew, Alicia thought to herself that this guy was merciless toward small animals. She realized that if she missed this chance to escape, she would definitely be killed. As Rod began walking away, she frantically thought, telling him not to go, that she was right there. She struggled once more, thinking she absolutely had to get through to that soldier somehow. While she was doing this, the gecko suddenly appeared on Andrew's shoulder, catching her attention. When she stared at it, its gaze met hers, and they locked eyes. Immediately after, Andrew called out to Rod with an unusual aura, telling him to wait, which Rod instantly noticed and sensed. Turning to face him, Rod realized that the presence he felt was the same as what he had felt back then, and feigned ignorance as he asked Andrew why he was being called. Andrew seriously told him that, actually, he was afraid he had just heard about it, but that he couldn't let him go. Rod asked who had told him this, and Andrew explained that it was the rune's very voice itself, which he sometimes heard. Andrew said the rune had told him, but we are shown that it was the gecko speaking to him, telling him that these two were the ones who had stood in their way in hiding, and that he should kill them here and now. Alicia's eyes widened in shock as she realized what this gecko was, recalling Clint's words that this was Vordane's double. Sensing the danger Andrew posed, Rod immediately leapt backward. Andrew raised his rune and scissors, informing him that whenever he heard that voice, he was usually able to wield unbelievable power. He swung his scissors through the air, chanting the words Zealous Reparo, and because of this, a giant pair of scissors appeared, which he called the Great Scissors. He then uttered the word pruning, and the massive scissors surged forward, ready to slice toward Rod. Because of its speed, Rod's eyes widened. He barely managed to bend backward and avoid being snipped by the giant scissors, but his fake glasses and the surrounding trees weren't as lucky. Alicia screamed in deep concern, while Rod shifted his gaze toward Andrew. Andrew praised him for his evasive maneuver, but added up as he recalled his giant scissors. As the scissors moved behind him, Andrew explained that pruning was a technique meant to allow plants to grow beautifully. Branches began sprouting from the trees that Andrew cut, and in an instant, they grew massively, surrounding Rod and taking him by surprise. Andrew explained that the severed wood served as nourishment, spurring growth and resulting in a massive, multi-branch tree. He raised his rune as the growing tree continued to engulf Rod, and before long, he uttered the words Vuelo Zikis. At that moment, an enormous tree sprouted forth, towering high before him. Andrew then stated that Rod should become nourishment within that tree, calling him teacher, and added that flowers would bloom from it. Alicia, on the other hand, gaped in disbelief upon seeing this and couldn't believe Rod Royce had been defeated so quickly. She thought to herself that this had to be a joke, especially since he was an ultimate treasure wielder too. She then wondered aloud if he was completely helpless without his ultimate treasure. Vordane's gecko double turned its gaze toward her and coldly remarked that, of course, he was worthless. After all, they were nothing but phonies. Alicia was startled when she heard a whispering voice, which reminded her of what Doral had mentioned about a whispering voice. The gecko pointed out that there had once been real heroes, but none of them knew the real deal, not even Clevatess himself. He revealed that he was the one who ended that era, the era when humans and devil beasts were much more evenly matched, the age of true heroes. He added that he must bring an end to the present era and restore the legend. The gears of time must once again be set in motion. For the sake of awakening the true hero, he said, the scattered memories of Toa must be pieced together. Hearing all this, Alicia was left confused about what Vordane meant by the true hero. But her thoughts were abruptly cut off when the tree constricting her tightened even more, causing her to gag and choke on her own blood. As she suffered, the gecko commented that he had already said too much. Following this, the gecko ordered Andrew to kill Alicia and then Rod afterward, to which Andrew responded that he understood. He added that he was glad Alicia was in devil beast form, as this meant he wouldn't have to worry about corpse disposal that way. Alicia, on the verge of death from being constricted, listened as Andrew stated that thanks to the Chancellor, he had been able to find the whispering voice, and that as long as he obeyed that voice, he could become stronger. Listening carefully, Alicia noticed that Andrew was only hearing the voice. She realized he couldn't actually see the gecko perched on his shoulder. Andrew continued, saying that once he became stronger, he wanted to fill the world with flowers. Alicia was bewildered upon hearing this and questioned internally what this guy was even talking about. The flowers, the true hero, and piecing together the scattered memories of Toa. She wondered what it all meant, and in sheer frustration, cursed in her thoughts, saying her mind couldn't keep up with it. As the constriction dragged on, She felt her skull cracking and splitting apart. Andrew, meanwhile, decided that a follow-up attack wouldn't even be necessary. He pondered if the power he used earlier still wasn't ready, questioning whether the damage she had taken still wasn't enough. Alicia forced herself to think not yet as her entire body continued being crushed, her eyes bulging from her skull due to the intense pressure from the strangler fig. Before long, her entire body was compressed within the tree, and Andrew simply watched it happen. Afterward, Andrew deactivated his rune and thought to himself that his job here was done. With that, he decided to return to the Black Tower. However, just as he turned his back on the tree, it suddenly exploded in a burst of yellow light, the same kind of rune power Alicia had displayed when fighting her giant self. Andrew spun around in shock and saw Alicia still alive, though her eye was bulging outward. Alicia placed her eyeball back into its socket and, with rage burning in her eyes, thought to herself that this wasn't over yet. As Andrew and Vordane's gecko fixed their gazes on her, they noticed the rune glowing on her body, prompting surprise at what they were witnessing. The gecko studied her blood-soaked body intently and remarked inwardly that she bore a rune. If so, he supposed, she must also be one of those who possessed a fragment. As Alicia charged forward, she felt intense pain in her left arm, forcing her to think that her broken arm had been pulverized even further. But in exchange, she told herself with determination in her eyes, she had maintained strength in her right arm, the one etched with the rune, glowing with yellow aura. She prepared her blazing fist, thinking that this attack would land squarely on Vordane. But just as she closed in on the gecko, he vanished from Andrew's shoulder in the blink of an eye. Because of this, her attack missed, and she was shocked by how swiftly the gecko had disappeared. Andrew, puzzled, asked her what exactly she was aiming at. She cursed in frustration, thinking how her body had been crushed just to gain this attack, and if this missed, things would go south fast. She reminded herself that she was already on the verge of death, and any more damage would truly be the end of her. At that moment, Andrew's floating scissors moved into position beside her, her body now caught squarely between the twin blades. Andrew immediately invoked Zealous Reparo, Great Scissors, pruning, and the massive scissors began to close in horizontally to slice her apart. But before they could do so, something flew between the blades, stopping them mid-cut. Irritated, Andrew turned toward the source, confused about what it was, and when he saw it, he noticed that the blade was red, a sight that left him even more bewildered, while Alicia's eyes widened in recognition. The one who had thrown the red blade declared that it was an ultimate treasure. It turned out to be Rod, who had somehow survived being swallowed by the massive tree Andrew had conjured. He added that the blade was a broken fragment of General Doral's ultimate treasure, the Black Dragon. Upon hearing this, Alicia's shocked expression softened into recognition as she recalled destroying that very ultimate treasure, and she wondered if Rod had collected its fragments. Rod retrieved the fragment using the rope that was tied to it immediately afterward, while Alicia collapsed onto the ground after being saved. Catching the ultimate treasure fragment, Rod remarked to Andrew that, of course, he hadn't been able to bring Snowflower, but he wasn't careless enough to venture into enemy territory empty-handed. Andrew scoffed at him as he activated his rune, remarking that even a small fragment of an ultimate weapon was indeed formidable. Meanwhile, at the houses near Clevatess's tower, Nay and her group were moving around searching for evacuees. She approached one of her companions stationed on the second floor of a house and asked for the evacuation status. The student replied that there was nobody on the second floor either. The student pointed out how misty the area was and mentioned that all the surrounding faculty had been ordered to evacuate. He also stated that the chancellor's voice was absolute and asked if they really needed to bother checking every single house, to which Nay agreed, but explained that they should still patrol and check just in case to be certain, pointing out that it was Group A's duty. However, the student she was speaking to muttered that he thought their task was pointless, prompting Nay to chuckle. But deep inside, she silenced him in her mind, cursing nervously and admitting she didn't want to proceed ahead at all. She thought to herself that what awaited them wasn't just any ordinary student, that what stood ahead wasn't even human, but a devil-beast king. If they approached Clen carelessly, she thought, they would all be killed, and even if they weren't, he would scramble their minds. She also pointed out that she had a terrible feeling about this and reasoned that it was only natural for her to move as slowly as possible. While she spoke to the other students in her group about heading to the next house in the area, she continued thinking to herself that this was for the sake of all of Group A and that she was only trying to ensure their survival. Her fellow students exchanged glances, and suddenly Mary called out to her, startling her and grabbing her attention. Uneasily, Nay asked what it was, to which Mary pointed out that the fighting had already begun. Mary said that Group C on the other side of the forest and Group B beyond it were both already fighting the incomprehensible creatures, which deeply worried Nay. She questioned what Mary meant by incomprehensible creatures, and Mary added that those same creatures had now appeared in their area too. As they stared at Clin's shadow monstrous wolves that had arrived there, Mary asked Nay what they should do, addressing her as teacher, and whether they were going to fight those things. During this, we are shown Clen, grinning as he waited to see what would unfold from his plan. A devil beast with countless eyes, sharp fangs, and claws launched an attack. It seized a student from Group C, which was being led by instructor Langface. He could hardly believe that what they were facing was a devil beast. Meanwhile, the captured child could do nothing but scream in terror. Their companions watched in shock, unsure of what to do, while others scrambled to dodge the beast's tail on the opposite side. From the Black Tower, the devil beast king Clevatess laughed. He challenged the wizards to come at him with everything they had. He was holding the Book of Toa in his hands. He wondered that if he does not crush the enemy at his strongest, then how could he possibly drag him out? Back at the battle, Lang used his wand to draw and chant Bathist Midfeld. Separate blasts were released, striking different parts of the devil beast's body and punching holes through it. As a result, the creature dropped the student it had been about to devour. A schoolmate rushed toward him to check on his condition. He asked if he was all right, but he screamed in pain from the impact of the fall. Confused, he questioned what kind of devil beast that was. Another teacher asked if they were not supposed to be facing the student in the tower. Lang explained that, just as he had said earlier, the very fact that the creature is able to hold an important tome of Toa meant it was likely a monster. It was possible that the devil beast in front of them had also come from the Black Tower. He warned them to be careful. There might be more than one. Even with its body riddled with holes, the devil beast was still not down. It managed to stand again, preparing to attack the group of students. They could not believe that after taking so much damage, it still refused to die. They were wondering aloud what kind of creature it was. Unbeknownst to them, another one had been hiding behind a student with pink hair. Lang shouted a warning that there was an enemy behind her, but it was too late. As the girl turned around, the devil beast had already grabbed her. Her companions cried out her name, Meg. One of her classmates tapped the one beside him, reassuring him that Meg would be all right. Meg's rune was flame-related, and the whispering voice was highly compatible with flames. Meg faced the devil beast and activated her crest magic, the flame rune Hibachi. Chanting Zfeld, she unleashed a massive burst of fire from her right hand. The flames engulfed the creature's body, and a symbol appeared in Meg's right eye. Thanks to this, she managed to break free from the beast. Soon after, she was able to stand while the devil beast's entire body continued to burn. Meg admitted she was terrified by what had happened. Soon after, blood began trickling from her nose as a result of the magic she had released. She insisted that fire was effective. Flames worked far better against them than relying on physical attacks. Their teacher on the other side was startled when he heard this. He hesitated to unleash fire inside the forest, but if it caused a large blaze, he said he would count on his fellow instructor. The other teacher agreed and prepared his own magic. They would continue their successive attacks. From the Black Tower, Clen could clearly see the flames they were producing. He wondered if they had realized that fire was effective. Could it have been Vordain who suggested this? But it did not matter. The scent of Vordain emanated from them. Clen knew they were being strengthened through some means other than Devil Eker. It was obvious to him. The source of the power was the Book of Toa. Power leaked from the locked tome that had once been in Haydn's furnace, even while sealed. It was akin to a domain. The source of a Devil Beast King's power was each of their respective domains, territories where they were born. This was a fundamental, inalienable law of this world. Meanwhile, at Moon Mountain, Soldiers from Estlin under the command of Sword Saint Owen Corps were exploring the area. Two enormous devil beasts with sharp fangs appeared before them, ready to attack. Owen drew his sword in preparation. Back to Clan, he said that when a devil beast king left his domain, he would struggle to fully use his power. The farther they went from their domain, the weaker they would become. However, as long as he held the Book of Toa, he realized that if he converted the overflowing power from the book into himself, he could wield it. Clan smiled at the thought. Back to the Sword Saint Owen. He was gasping for breath, his cape stained with blood after battling the two devil beasts that blocked their path. He had successfully slain the two creatures with his sword, though it was clear the fight had not been easy. Even so, he felt relief that he had managed to defeat them. They were now at the foot of Moon Mountain, and Clan remarked that the power of a domain was absolute. Owen noticed a wall blocking the entrance and questioned what it was. His companion confirmed it was indeed a wall. Owen then asked if she was the only one who survived, and the woman replied that she was. The Sword Saint explained that, according to legends, the outer gates of the world would not open unless the four devil beast kings were defeated. That was likely the reason for the wall's existence. But he added that it did not matter. The king's orders were not to break through the Moon Mountain, but to recover the 13 ultimate treasures. That was the purpose of their expedition. As they continued walking, they noticed signs of battle in the area. They followed the trail down into the valley, searching there for the treasures. Back to Clan at the Black Tower, he stated that he had finally figured it out. Bourdain was also using that same power, the very power driving the young wizards to act. He could sense that same energy covering the entire area. In other words, there were likely at least two objects similar to the Book of Toa from hidden present there. The Chancellor and the Devil Beast King could be seen again. He used this power to sow chaos throughout the land. Back with Group A led by Nay, they could hardly believe it when a devil beast appeared before them. Nay pleaded with all the students to run and save themselves. However, Mary reassured her that it was fine. She and her companions were already prepared. The whispering voice had reached all of them. The group closed ranks and formed up to confront the creature. With only her finger, Mary drew and chanted Loth Valflor. As a result, shackles materialized and restrained the shadow beast, binding its hands and mouth. The chains forced the target into a state of calm. Within moments, it would fall silent as if drifting to sleep. True enough, it suddenly stilled and laid down on the ground. Mary declared that she had sealed one of them. Nay was amazed by what she had done. However, Mary warned that there was another one behind them. She asked her companions if they could handle it, and they answered yes. One of the girls declared that they should leave that one to them. Another added that they could not let Mary take all the glory. The girl activated the wind rune, Windy White Wing, while the boy used the earth rune, Shovel. Both of them drew formulas with their fingers in the air. When the girl chanted Mizir Resort, she attacked with a wind slash, lifting herself up and floating with the air while striking and slicing the beast's body. Meanwhile, the boy knelt on the ground and chanted Bay Satra, Bottomless Swamp, creating a mire that slowly began swallowing the shadow beast's body. The creature groaned and struggled to break free. Witnessing this, Nay could not help but be impressed by those kids. She could hardly believe this was the level of young people now, rune-bearing wizards. Because of that, she wondered if they truly had a chance. Clan was shown again, and Nay was pondering whether they could really defeat him. Would they truly be able to win against an actual Devil Beast King? After the girl used the wind slash attack, blood trickled from her nose. Meanwhile, the mist continued to blanket the surroundings, thanks to the support provided by Zaftir. Meanwhile, the released devil beasts had scattered throughout the area. These creatures were massive, moving together as they scouted the forest. They did not expect that something would suddenly strike all of them. He darted rapidly among them, leaving gaping holes in their bodies, with some even cleaved clean in half. The one responsible for this astonishing attack was Ray, who single-handedly defeated 5 devil beasts with ease. A symbol appeared in his eyes, and from the dark world, it seems the lizard form of the Devil Beast King perched on his shoulder. It whispered to them all to take the book. Everyone could hear the whispering voice, and in unison, they repeated the command to take it. This sent them on the hunt to claim the book from Clan. Back with Nay's group, They finally managed to defeat another devil beast that had attacked them. The two students who fought it were visibly exhausted. They were already bleeding from their noses and admitted how incredibly difficult it had been. Nei was once again amazed at them. They had managed to defeat a devil beast of that level using only magic. She was then shocked when she noticed that the girl's arm was injured. She asked about her condition, seeing that it was bleeding. The girl replied that she was fine, saying it was just a bit of flesh that had been torn off. Nei was dumbfounded to hear that she had lost flesh so casually. More than that, the student insisted that they needed to obtain the book. She paid no mind to her bleeding arm or the blood dripping from her nose. Their companions agreed that they indeed needed to get it. Nei grew concerned upon hearing them all say the same thing. She wondered what had gotten into them. It was frightening to hear them speaking in unison. One of them then asked her if she could not hear the voice. Curious, she asked what voice they meant. Mary explained that it was the whispering voice. But if she could not hear it, perhaps it was quieter for her that way. Nei could not understand what they meant. Did that mean it was not quiet for them? As the group of students continued walking ahead, Nei wondered what they were talking about. At that moment, she sensed in those children the same aura as a terrible monster, the kind she had felt from Clen. Mary approached the injured girl and told her to show her wound so she could stop the bleeding. Nei, left behind, grew anxious. It was deeply unsettling. She quickly ran to catch up to them, calling for them to wait for her. Meanwhile, at the top of the Black Tower, Clen was counting. 8, no, 10, had already been taken down. Vordain, he thought, treated them as nothing more than disposable pawns. To a devil beast king, hominids were nothing but insects, and even Clen agreed with that sentiment. The scene shifted back to Group C, who were still locked in battle with a devil beast. Meg had already sustained heavy damage, yet she continued to attack using her flame rune. As Clen observed their fight, he wondered why Vordain deliberately chose to use those whelps. Vordain had given them such overwhelming power that their noses were bleeding. What exactly was he trying to accomplish? Was it simply to raise wizards? Clen muttered to himself, whatever. Everyone who failed to make it through the second wave would be culled. From the raging flames emerged another wave of devil beasts, launching an attack on Group C. Fear was evident on their faces upon seeing them, and Instructor Lang's face grew frustrated at the sight. From a distance, the fires from those battles were clearly visible. There was someone else observing from a cliff, catching only faint glimpses of light and the sounds of the chaos. The Emperor had ordered them to send the army if there was any movement. But with the mist so thick, they could not see clearly. He wondered if they should treat this as the sign. He wondered aloud and asked someone he called Teach, who told him to cut that out. But the hooded figure insisted, asking if he was not supposed to be undercover as a teacher. He was curious why he didn't go. The man replied that he was not the scholastic type. Couldn't he see that just by looking at him? The one he was speaking to turned out to be none other than Zasak, the leader of the bandit group known as the Crows. Zasak smirked and said it did not matter whether he was an outsider. He was close to fulfilling his role as a thief. The scene shifted to Gart. As he flew across the sky, he noticed something unusual. A massive tree had suddenly appeared. He wondered if it could be sorcery as well. Using his keen eyesight, he observed what was happening in that area. Soon, he spotted Rod Royce locked in battle. He also saw Alicia lying motionless nearby. He questioned what kind of small devil beast that might be. After a moment of thought, he decided to act and descended. Meanwhile, Rod continued his fight against the student Andrew, wielding a broken fragment of Dorel's treasure. Andrew taunted him, asking why he would not just surrender. The forest, he said, was his domain. He had planted seeds throughout the area, and the strangler trees would continue to wrap around Rod's legs, making it impossible to fight properly while constantly cutting them away. In fact, he knew Rod could not fully evade the attacks of Andrew's scissors. A slash from one had already grazed his face. Andrew admitted that at first, he had been frightened by the fragment of the ultimate treasure in Rod's hands. But now, he was confident the battle would end here. Drawing with his finger, he chanted Balearis Gotra. Not one, but 4 massive scissors materialized before him. Blood dripped from Andrew's nose, yet he pressed on, summoning his root giant. From beneath the ground, an enormous root emerged, forming a giant with arms, which Andrew climbed onto. Rod was alarmed by its presence as Andrew commanded the giant to crush him. But before it could strike, the giant, along with Andrew riding atop it, was suddenly slammed to the ground. The one responsible was none other than Gart. He had attacked and kicked it down with overwhelming force. Andrew was stunned at the sight, as was Rod Royce. Still in her devil beast form and lying bloodied on the ground, Alicia could hardly believe what she saw. Gart had effortlessly brought down the root giant with a single kick. Upon landing, Andrew carefully observed Gart. He questioned who this person was and why he had come from the sky. More than that, however, he realized his root giant could no longer move. It was as if it had been staked to the ground. Curiosity struck him. How could someone's legs be that powerful? Meanwhile, Gart stared at him intently. He noticed that Andrew's nose was bleeding, and not just that, but also his eye, from which an unusual symbol had emerged. Surprised by the attention, Andrew quickly covered it. Gart explained that it was because he was trying to wield power beyond what he could naturally handle. And, according to his master's wishes, Gart had no intention of killing him. But if he continued to force that power, Gart warned, he would surely die. Andrew froze, unable to believe Gart's words about his impending death. Gart further added that Andrew's determination to unleash his power was only bringing ruin upon himself. But Andrew simply told him to shut up. He revealed his crest, saying that what Gart was seeing was only a small fraction of his true power. In that moment, Rod moved swiftly, striking Andrew at the back of the neck and knocking him unconscious. As this happened, Andrew's thoughts drifted. He only ever wanted to fill the world with flowers. He remembered a woman watering flowers, smiling at him warmly. At last, he collapsed, face down on the ground, smiling faintly, a detail Rod quietly took notice of. Rod acknowledged that Gart had saved him, but Gart pointed out that Rod seemed to be holding back his punches because his opponent was only a child. Rod admitted that was part of it, but also explained that the ultimate treasure he was using was not his own. It felt different compared to what he was accustomed to. As the two conversed, Alicia was stunned to realize that they knew each other. Gart noticed her reaction and stared at her. He remarked that Rod had found the missing student. Rod was confused by what he meant. Gart could not believe Rod had not yet realized it. The devil beast before them, despite its appearance, carried her aura. The aura of the hero, Alicia. However, in Salsian, she goes by Alyssa Slayhant. Rod was shocked to hear this. He argued that Alicia was supposed to be a grown woman, but Gart revealed that her partner possessed the ability to transform people. Furthermore, other powers had altered her, turning her into a devil beast. Gart asserted that his eyes could not be mistaken. Alicia, now aware of what Gart had realized, admitted she never expected him to uncover her true identity. From within that world, she could see his original devil beast form. Yet if his words had reached her, she thought of something. But before she could continue, Gart scooped her up, declaring that it would be easy for him to crush her with just a pinch now. He said he understood everything she was saying. Therefore, she should tell him everything about the mysteries of that place and about what Verdane was planning. He demanded to know everything she knew. The scene shifted to another location. From an opening shrouded in mist, a group of robed figures emerged. They carried lanterns and walked in a line, all heading toward the same destination, each bearing a symbol marked on their foreheads. One of them pointed the way, stating that the assembly hall was underground. As they descended, they spoke among themselves about how long it had been since they were last summoned there. One replied that it had been 2 years. Another remarked that it would be better if they gathered more often. According to them, while the mist itself was significant, the current summons likely meant an emergency was at hand. They expected they would finally receive an explanation about what was happening. One noted that the concentration of mana in the area confirmed it must be serious. They also mentioned that, from the perspective of mainstream Eldism, they probably appeared like a cult. One of the difficulties they faced was being unable to carry out their activities openly. Still, there was wind in their sails. While the death of General Dorel might have been disappointing, the day was nearing when magic would change the world, the day when they would finally achieve their grand ambition. Someone asked the deputy head if everything had been properly concealed, and he confirmed it had. There was an exceptionally strong barrier around the main school building for protection, so only invited individuals could enter. To ensure complete safety, They would also verify whether the students in the outside dormitories were asleep. He said he had already sent people to check. The dormitory mentioned was the one for the 5th years. One by one, the robed figures opened the doors to check whether the students were asleep. Once they confirmed that everything was fine, they moved on to the next room. The next doors they opened belonged to Edison and the Bluey twins, who were fast asleep. After confirming they were asleep, they remarked that there was no longer any problem. That would be the last room they needed to check. Unbeknownst to them, however, the twins were actually hiding above and behind the door. Both grinned mischievously, and moments later, they revealed themselves by loudly shouting boo at the intruders. The robed figures were startled. Leon kicked one of them, while another, holding a lantern, froze in shock, unable to believe what he was seeing. He insisted they had just confirmed the twins were asleep in bed. Tigel explained that what they had seen was a death mask, calling the robed figure a dumbass before punching him in the face. He elaborated that the death mask was an alchemical sorcery involving the mixing of magicite powder with clay according to a special recipe. It could be used to take a model of a person's face. They had learned about it from a book and added their own spin to it. Normally, they used the spell just for their pranks, but this time, they planned to model their own faces. Dragging the unconscious robed figures into their room, they said they will place the masks modeled after their own faces and wigs they had prepared in advance onto the dummies and put them in bed, ensuring everything looked perfect. The twins agreed this plan would work. Thus, instead of the 2 robed figures reporting back, the twins disguised themselves using masks copied from the intruders' faces. Of course, there was no time to craft wigs, but with their hoods on, it would be impossible for anyone to notice the difference. The twins stepped out, walking calmly with their hoods pulled low to hide their blonde hair. Blending in with the other robed figures, they whispered to each other that while the Black Tower looked interesting, this underground gathering seemed even more worth investigating. When asked how the students were, they responded that everyone was fine and asleep. The ones they checked on were the same. The guards at the entrance did not doubt their words and let them pass without issue. The twins exchanged grins. It had been a piece of cake. Now, they discovered that the school building indeed had a basement. As they descended further, they were shocked at the scale of the gathering. The hall was far larger than they expected, and among the assembled figures were many familiar faces. They spotted the mayor of a remote Eslan town and, beside him, the local priest. Being from Eslan themselves, they recognized several others from their homeland as well. They also noticed the advisor to Bolet's Ministry of Magic conversing with an advisor from Eslan, which surprised them. They can't believe they were secretly connected. The twins were amazed to see elites from various sectors of both kingdoms gathered in one place. Tigel, with his keen interest in magic, whispered that he knew of secret societies' existence, but he never realized they extended this far. Suddenly, a voice behind them remarked that it was indeed surprising. Startled, the twins tensed and turned around. The man signaled for them to remain quiet. He apologized and introduced himself as Edison Lucraft. The twins were shocked to see him and demanded to know how he had managed to get inside. The twins asked how Edison had recognized them despite their disguises. Edison apologized again, explaining that he had been watching them the entire time. Edison asked them what the gathering was about, and Tigel questioned whether he had really come there without any clue, while Leon pointed out that Edison's skin tone stood out and that he was not even wearing a disguise. They warned him to keep his head down or risk being caught. Edison followed their advice. Leon added that, if they were not mistaken, this gathering was the Union. Edison was shocked to hear that, and the twins again reminded him to keep his head lowered. They explained that the Union was an association that had existed since the era when magic was barely known, back when it was thought of as nothing more than street tricks. The goal of the Union was to perfectly reproduce the spells from the fairy tale of the legend of the hero. They had put out several books from which they based some of their own spells, including the disguise technique they were using, but those books were extremely difficult to obtain. Tigel scoffed, questioning who would even care about such things now. The people in this Union, he said, had always operated in secret, working behind the scenes to advance modern magic. If Edison could understand that, then he might grasp the situation. To the Union, international wars were nothing but opportunities to test their magic. That was how twisted they were. The twins had already suspected that the union held influence over their school. What they had not expected was that the chancellor himself would turn out to be the head of the union. The leader on the stage, dressed in a pink robe, turned to face the entire assembly. The chancellor revealed his identity and addressed them as comrades. The chancellor declared that the Holy Land of Salcian was currently in a state of emergency. The Black Tower had appeared, and mysterious barriers of dense mist surrounded the area. All of them were able to enter only because of his magic. However, it was impossible to come or go from there on foot. If they were wondering why he had summoned everyone despite the ongoing emergency, the answer was simple: the time had come. Holding the Book of Toa, he proclaimed that they would finally accomplish their long-cherished wish, the complete restoration of the legend of the hero. The time for it had arrived. Edison muttered in confusion at the mention of completing the restoration of the legend of the heroes, unsure of what it truly meant. The twins were equally intrigued. It sounded monumental. Tigel remarked that things were definitely getting even more interesting than they had expected. The scene shifted to Balestrin Castle in the capital of Bolet, Bales. The emperor walked through the castle halls and passed one of the servants stationed there. The servant froze and asked the emperor what brought him there. The emperor retorted that he did not need a reason to visit his own child. He demanded to be let through, explaining that he had questions regarding Salcian for his daughter Milea, the school chairman. Though the guard tried to restrain him, he ultimately had no choice but to let him pass. Meanwhile, in Eldon Castle in Esselberg, the capital of Esslin, King Uriel was in his office, deeply focused, leaning on his hand as he read. Something unusual caught his attention. He was reviewing files on the Chancellor, Cardinal Elro Romain. Back when Romain had been part of the Esslin diocese, before rising to the rank of cardinal, he had seemed nothing more than a devout priest. He had no involvement in magic whatsoever. Based on the records, it was unclear if he had any connection to the Union at all. He then questioned when things changed. He wondered if it had begun after he accepted his position in Salcian. No, it seemed to have started earlier. The turning point appeared to be when he met General Dorel. From that moment, he became an entirely different person. And during that same period, something else unusual had also emerged. Back at the Union Assembly, the Chancellor raised the Book of Toa and proclaimed that at this very moment, all power was concentrated in the Holy Land of Salcian. In other words, it was the Holy Scriptures themselves, what they called the Books of Toa, the very source of the hominids' history. He declared it no exaggeration to say that hominids were born alongside those books. In a sense, the books represented the domain of humankind itself. Within them was recorded the means for their expansion, none other than the legend of the hero, the word of God they were meant to follow. From atop Edison's head, the devil-beast King Laswell peeked out, quietly listening to the speech. The twins whispered to each other, commenting on how incredibly grand in scale this revelation was. The Chancellor continued, revealing that the book of the second passage, the town of origin, was already in his hands. As everyone knew, they had secured all of the last 4 books except for one. The final book, the most heavily guarded and difficult to obtain, the book of the third passage, the furnace, had manifested alongside the Black Tower. He urged his comrades on, asking what better time than now to fulfill their dearest wish using their own power, the long-cherished wish of their union. Everybody cheered on. Placing a hand upon his own face, the Chancellor declared that it was no longer necessary to hide who he truly was. Back at Balestrin Castle, Emperor Bay's wards walked the halls deep in thought, the word mirror lingering in his mind ever since Nay had mentioned it. Something about it unsettled him. Now, he finally remembered why. Dorel, too, had possessed an enormous mirror in his quarters, one that seemed unbecoming of him. Until this moment, the Emperor had never considered it unusual. Yet that same mirror was the one in the room of his daughter, Milea. Why would the very same mirror be in Dorel's room? Determined to confront her, he went straight to her quarters and asked her maidservant if Milea was inside. If she's asleep, he told her to wake her up. The maid replied that she had seen the princess only moments earlier, and that Milea had ordered no one to be allowed inside. Unfazed, the Emperor invoked his authority, commanding the maid to step aside. Announcing his entrance, he warned that he was coming in. But the moment he opened the door, he froze in shock. Back at the union gathering, the leader stood masked. With deliberate motion, they removed the face of the chancellor, revealing it to be nothing more than a mask. The Bluey twins gasped, realizing the resemblance to their own death masks. This meant there was someone whose face had been used as the model. Behind the chancellor's visage was a woman's face, none other than Princess Milea herself. Tossing aside the mask, Milea declared that the time had come to open the secret chamber. Back again in Baelstrin Castle, as the emperor stepped into his daughter's room, his eyes fell upon a gaping hole in the wall. Rather than alarm, a faint smile crossed his face. A flashback took place 14 years ago in Bolet. At Baelstrin Castle, the emperor, Bae's wards, was seen walking through the halls. He went to check on the maidservant of his daughter, Milea, to ask how she was doing. The maid replied that Milea had been like that the entire day, simply sitting in front of a mirror, muttering something to herself. She stared blankly while seated there. The emperor remarked that perhaps the death of her mother had been far too painful for the child, especially since she was only 4 years old. The maid grew teary-eyed, pitying Princess Milea. Bae's wards then realized something was strange about Milea's mother. She would often stare at empty spaces and lose all expression in her face. It was said that this might have been due to the Alusa bloodline. Then one day, she climbed to a high part of the castle and left a message to tell her daughter Milea that she was thankful for her birth and to apologize to her. The emperor cursed in the present, questioning why she had been so selfish, why she chose to simply leap to her death. He muttered that he never would have married her if he had known she would turn out that way. The maid was about to speak further, but the emperor silenced her. Even without her mother, he said, he was committed to raising Milea. After all, she was his daughter, the daughter of Emperor Bae's wards. At that moment, someone arrived and called for his attention. When Bae's wards asked what it was, he was informed that someone wished to speak with him. Nervously, the servant revealed that the person was already in the throne room. The emperor could hardly believe it. Why had they allowed a visitor without an appointment to reach the throne room? The servant then explained. Meanwhile, Milea heard their conversation and briefly shifted her attention away from the mirror. The servant explained to the emperor that not a single imperial guard had been able to stop the visitor's advance. He had walked straight into the castle and directly to the throne room. When he removed the cape covering his head, it was revealed to be Dorel. The emperor immediately recognized him and was surprised by his presence there. He had heard that Dorel had been wandering aimlessly for the past 10 years. The emperor took his seat on the throne and asked what it was this time. He told him to state his purpose. Dorel knelt and declared that he wished to pledge loyalty to his empire. With his sword by his side, he expressed hope that the emperor would accept his service, his power, and all the magical knowledge he carried. Resting his chin on his hand, the emperor asked what kind of service he was referring to. Did he mean he was seeking reasonable compensation? Was that it? If so, what kind of payment was he asking for? Depending on his answer, the emperor said he would decide whether to accept him or have him beheaded. While bowing his head, Dorel said he requested only one thing: the freedom to conduct thaumaturgical research. The emperor grew curious at the term he used. Thaumaturgy was unfamiliar to him. Did Dorel mean he wished to specialize in the way of magic? Dorel nodded. In the coming years, magic would become vital for strengthening the military. However, mastering it was difficult. There were limits to what he could accomplish in seclusion. To broaden the scope of his research, he needed the support of a nation. Through his knowledge, the army could achieve many times more than usual using only half the number of soldiers. For this reason, he implored the emperor to accept him into his service. The emperor became intrigued and asked what the big idea was. Did Dorel aspire to become a great sage like in the fairy tale of the legend of the hero? Dorel replied that, unfortunately, he could not do that. However, he assured the emperor that he would find and raise someone who could. As the two conversed, Milea peeked through the doorway, curious about what was happening. Meanwhile, Dorel appeared fully convinced of what he was saying. The emperor pointed his hand at Dorel and said that what he had said was intriguing. Therefore, he would accept him into his service. However, he warned that if Dorel ever betrayed him, he would have his head cut off. But if Dorel wished to study thaumaturgy or whatever it was called in this land, he would allow it. Dorel expressed immense gratitude, while the emperor simply smiled. After their agreement, Dorel left the emperor's presence, and Milea quickly backed away and ran off. When her maidservant noticed, she asked where she was going. As Milea ran, she wondered to herself what it was. She had been hearing a voice. She followed Dorel as he left, panting as she tried to keep up. As he was about to leave, she observed him from a distance. But moments later, when he disappeared from her sight, he suddenly appeared behind her. Dorel realized that the child could hear the voice. Milea was shocked. Dorel suggested that she face the mirror and ask who it was. The voice, he said, was calling to her. Milea pondered the voice he referred to and remembered her mother, whose Aluza bloodline was said to guide her. Dorel left her there as Milea stood still, thinking deeply about the Aluza blood. She followed his advice and returned inside to face the mirror once more. She leaned in close and examined her reflection carefully. Following Dorel's suggestion, she asked who it was. When she asked the question, the Devil Beast King suddenly appeared behind her. Several days later, Milea could be seen outside, playing with a dog. She was smiling, and the emperor noticed that his daughter had changed. He was pleased, saying this suited the princess of Bolet far better. As he walked, he admitted to himself that he did not know what had happened to her, but figured that was just how children were. And now that he had added Dorel to his ranks, his forces would grow even stronger. The rise of Bolet could no longer be stopped. It would be the age of magic. Even as Milea stood outside, it was shocking to hear her agree with her father. She held the Book of Toa and declared that this would be the era of magic. In her eyes, it was clear she had been possessed by the Devil Beast King of the North, Vordian. Back in the present, while holding the Book of Toa, she introduced herself as Milea Renault Aluza Wards, daughter of Emperor Bay's wards and descendant of Bishop Aluza, the possessor of Salcian's book, once called the Town of Origin. She told her fellow Union members to extol the book, for it was the word of God that would lead them to thaumaturgy. Two members talked, remarking on how beautiful Princess Milea had grown. It felt nostalgic to see her appear before them again. Back then, it had been a shocking event. She had defeated their previous leader in a one-on-one magical duel. That was when they learned about the Book of Toa and its power. But the most astonishing moment of all had been what she did at 14 years old. She had emerged from the other side of the mirror, smiling, while dragging the Chancellor by his clothes. Confused, the Chancellor knelt and asked what was happening and about the mirror. Milea smiled at him and told him not to worry about it. She called everyone's attention and declared that she was the master of Salcian. And now, she had been appointed as chairman. On the surface, she had the decisive vote on matters concerning the school's management, but this would serve as their base of operations. Their goal was to complete the research into thaumaturgy. Because of that, she would also need the power of the Chancellor. Thus, she would secretly replace him. The Chancellor broke into a nervous sweat upon hearing her words. A mirror appeared beside him, leaving him baffled as to how it had manifested again. Milea placed her hand on his head and said she would take a copy of him. She shoved his face against the mirror, prompting the Chancellor to protest and demand to know what she was doing. The eyes of the Devil Beast King emerged through Milea's eyes as the Chancellor begged her to stop. The Union members could do nothing but watch, terror and unease etched across their faces. They were stunned when she effortlessly taken the Chancellor's appearance. Using that spell, she could even alter her voice and physique. It was said to be an application of the spell they used, but the power of the Toa was truly terrifying. From the back, the Bluey twins and Edison were listening to the conversation. As they wondered aloud how she could wield two different faces, the twins commented that it was wild, and both agreed they wanted that power badly. They began to move forward. Edison called out to stop them, but Laswell, the Devil Beast King of the East, addressed him, telling him to let them be. Edison protested, saying whatever it was sounded far too dangerous. But the Devil Beast King replied that when it came to that, he will at least protect him somehow. The most important matter now was Vordian. He was curious about Vordian's connection to that girl. When would Vordian reveal himself, and what form would he take? He could strongly sense Vordian's presence and was certain he would soon appear. Perhaps Vordian had already sensed his own presence as well. Edison was stunned by this revelation. Laswell urged Vordian to get out as he had something he wanted to ask him. Outside, from a distance, the black tower built by Clen could be seen. As Alicia rode atop guard in his bird form, she noticed it and asked what that black tower and the mist surrounding it were. Gart asked her in return if she could really see the tower and mist from there. He explained that the black tower was created by Clevatess, while Queen Zaftir was responsible for producing the mist. Alicia could hardly believe what Clen had done. She wondered what had happened while she'd been shrunk. She suddenly thought of Zaftir, stunned that the Devil Beast Queen of the West was there as well. Gart clarified that it was not just the one from the West. All the Devil Beast Kings were present there in some form or another. Alicia asked if that meant even Laswell of the East, and Gart confirmed it. Alicia had never heard of a gathering of all the Devil Beast Kings, not even in fairy tales. But Gart affirmed that they truly were there, though their main bodies were located elsewhere. He added that he could fly her to the Black Tower if she wished, but he would not be able to get any information out of her. Because of that, he decided he would just land instead. Gart added that he was not a subordinate of Clevatess. He transformed into his human form and landed in front of Rod Royce. He told Rod that he had already explained the current situation to her. He understood what Alicia was saying and could interpret it for him. Rod, skeptical, asked how Gart could understand her and doubted if she was really the hero Alicia. Annoyed, Gart said that if he could not trust him, then their conversation was over. Rod responded that he trusted Gart. He then asked what the hero was saying. Alicia squeaked, and Gart listened closely before interpreting. At present, she thanked him for his help. She explained that the Chancellor was using mirror magic to travel between this world and the dark world on the other side. Alicia added that when you were caught by that spell, your form would change into that of a devil beast in the real world, but from the dark world, everything appeared ugly and decayed. It resembled a trial written in the legend of the hero. Surviving it granted one the power of the rune known as a skill. However, you would lose your memories of that place. With this information, Rod wondered if the student he had encountered earlier had also undergone such a trial. Alicia further revealed that the Devil Beast King of the North, Vordian, was also involved in all of this. Rod was stunned when he heard the name Vordian. Deep down, Alicia knew she could not tell him about the books of Toa, Clen, or the other Devil Beast Kings. Instead, she mentioned only that she believed the Dark World had a deeper layer, a red world where the secret chamber might be located. There was a hint. In the Dark World, cracks in the surroundings leaked red light. Gart was puzzled, saying he could not see that from where he was. Alicia confirmed this, suggesting there must be tears in the very seams of the world, rips in its fabric. The place likely was not yet complete. Because of these tears, she said she had slowly begun to sense Clen's presence again. It seemed Clen felt the same. From atop the tower, Clen simply smiled. Alicia thought that because of this, her previously shattered body had begun to recover slightly, with the strength in her left arm regenerating. With that, Alicia made a decision. She would dive into one of those cracks. Gart was stunned by what she said. Alicia pleaded with him to deliver that message to Clen if possible. She wanted Rod to confront the Chancellor and force answers from him, as he might be holding the book, and to do the worst to it. Gart relayed the message to Rod. Rod said he was fine with it, though hesitation lingered in his voice. Alicia admitted she was unsure if burning it would even have any effect on the book. Rod questioned if the plan was truly safe. Even if she successfully reached the location, she would be alone in the heart of enemy territory. Alicia only smiled, saying he was right about that. But she would not hold back. In her current form, she had no fear as she leapt into action. That willingness to charge forward, even in the face of certain death, was the very essence of a hero. As Alicia plunged downward, she thought to herself that even though she had said all that, she was certain that if Clen were there, he probably would have been the one to push her down. The very thought of it made her smile. Her animal form landed, then abruptly vanished into the ground. Rod and Gart were stunned by what they witnessed. Alicia had dived straight into the dark world, declaring that she was heading for the secret chamber. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Nay was running, gasping for breath. She was carrying an unconscious Mary Mary in her arms. She said this is the very reason she had insisted they should not continue forward. Behind Nay, thoughts raced through Mary Mary's mind. The thing she hated most was when things were not quiet. Upon hearing the heavy footsteps of their pursuer, Nay panicked. The creature chasing them was so powerful it hurled an entire house in their direction. Terrified, Nay sprinted as fast as she could. At that moment, Mary Mary's eyes opened, and she muttered that it had always been like this from the very beginning. Nay panicked, unsure of what to do as the massive shed hurtled toward them. Still carrying Mary Mary on her back, she acted quickly and activated her ability, controlling every iron object inside the shed. Gathering all the iron components, she forced them in one unified direction, redirecting the entire structure off course. The shed crashed past them, granting them a brief window to escape the devil beast's attack. But the creature was relentless. It ripped off a chunk of the shed and turned it into a weapon. Nay cursed under her breath. That had been far too close. Hearing the beast growl behind her, she glanced back to see it charging again. She sprinted as fast as her legs could carry her. While running, she thought about the shed that flew in their direction and how they totally lucked out. Inside it, she pulled every piece of iron she could find. Now, those very objects floated behind them, unnoticed by the beast, pulled by her power. Harnessing her ability, Nay manipulated the iron fragments to orbit around them. Within a certain radius, she could freely pull them toward herself or hurl them outward. By rapidly drawing them in, releasing, and spinning them, she amplified their speed and destructive force. With this technique, she figured she could at least hold her own against a single monster. Her brief relief shattered when she spotted more enemies closing in. Additional devil beasts emerged from the mist surrounding them. Nay muttered under her breath. This wasn't going to be easy. The iron objects continued whirling around her as she counted their pursuers. 6, 7 up to 9 in total. 9 devil beasts were now chasing them. Realization struck her. They were surrounded. Scanning the battlefield, she saw the other students sprawled unconscious across the ground. Everyone else had already been defeated. Their luck finally ran out when the enemy decided to target Mary Merriweather, the very person who should have been the most reliable among them all. Nay admitted to herself that she had fled under the excuse of trying to save Mary Mary, but it seemed this was the end of the line. No matter how many of those monsters they managed to defeat, more and more continued to emerge from the shadows. Their mana and stamina were limited. Why had they ever thought they could challenge something like him? Perhaps it had been inevitable. After all, there was no way those children could have realized that the one inside the Black Tower was a devil beast king, and one without an ounce of mercy. As countless devil beasts surrounded them, Nay questioned why she even continued to fight. Even in this hopeless situation, she could not stop resisting. The beasts' eyes gleamed with feral light, their razor-sharp fangs bared and ready to tear them apart. Behind her, Mary Mary's thoughts wandered to someone precious to her. A memory resurfaced, her great aunt from the Head family. She remembered quietly watching the woman lying in bed, reading a book. Her great aunt had asked her if she wanted to sit beside her. Delighted, Mary Mary eagerly climbed onto the bed and observed her. It was her great aunt who had taught her about human nature, someone she deeply admired. That was why it had been so harsh. First, her great uncle had died, leaving behind a vast inheritance. As a result, bitter disputes erupted among the relatives over the estate. The chaos had shaken her aunt to her core. She remembered how noisy everyone was, even her own parents. Yet despite all the commotion, her aunt never stopped smiling. Still, Mary Mary could see how her great aunt was wasting away before her very eyes, weakening a little more each time she visited her room. One day, her aunt called for her. When Mary Mary arrived and asked why she had been summoned, her great aunt beckoned her closer. Sitting beside her, Mary Mary listened as the woman softly told her that she would one day cause so much trouble. Those were her last words. The next day, her great aunt passed away. Mary Mary's great aunt had left behind a will that bequeathed the vast manor, 70% of the assets, including the land, to her. Because of this, Mary Mary had been thrust into the center of a bitter, ugly inheritance dispute. The noise was deafening. Everyone around her were noisy. None of them truly understood why she had been chosen as her heiress. They assumed it was simply because she had been ingrating. But her great-aunt's wish was to leave her the very landscape she and her husband had built together. The ever-changing seasons, the gentle winds that swept through the land. No one else appreciated it as she did. That alone was why she had been chosen. Mary Mary also wanted to protect it. She loved peace and quiet more than anything, and what she despised most was noise. To preserve that peace, she needed power, the power to silence the noisy, the power to never bend to anyone. That was the strength she longed for. Back in the present, those memories ignited something deep inside her. Meanwhile, Nei continued accelerating the rotation of the iron objects she controlled, forming a barrier to keep the devil beasts at bay. She taunted them, declaring that anyone who touched that ring would be flung away. The speed had increased so much that friction heated the air around it. One devil beast tested her, reaching out toward the spinning iron, and its arm was severed instantly. Nei said even she can do it if she tries. But the beast only stared at its severed limb, and moments later, the arm regenerated, restored to its original state. A bead of sweat rolled down Nei's temple as fear gripped her. She muttered in disbelief. They shouldn't have been able to regenerate so easily. Then, with terrifying coordination, 4 devil beasts leaped into the air. Nei's eyes darted upward, tracking their trajectory as they came down on her and Mary. Nei knew the next attack would come from above. If she were buried beneath the ground, the spinning iron ring would inevitably stop. But she also noticed another flaw. One side of their defenses was now exposed. Through that gap, she realized she could use the farming tool she carried to propel herself and escape. If she were alone, she could survive. But Mary was still strapped to her back. Because of that, she knew escape wasn't an option. She couldn't abandon her. Once again, a fire burning within flared. Nei wondered if this resolve came simply from being a teacher. Yet it didn't feel like just a job title. She couldn't quite explain why she felt this way. Perhaps it was because of something else, a memory. When she had been a child lying on the floor, she had read the fairy tale of the hero. She remembered thinking how cool it was to act that way. Heroes were always an inspiration to children. And perhaps that same thought echoed in the hearts of the unconscious students lying around them. Even her senior, Wizard Maynard, might have once shared the same dream. Everyone, at some point, had wished to be a hero. Deep inside, each person carried that longing, a reason to fight. Gathering what strength remained, Nei compressed every spinning iron fragment into a single blazing mass, a giant fiery sphere. With a final desperate strike, she hurled it upward toward the descending devil beasts. The attack ignited midair, searing them apart and cleaving their bodies clean through. The heated fragments scattered, soaring far beyond the battlefield. Breathing heavily, Nei muttered that she had used every last shot she had. That was it. She was spent. Though 4 monsters had fallen, 5 still surrounded them. And with nothing left to fight back, she admitted defeat. She apologized to Mary, saying she could no longer protect her. If Mary was going to harbor resentment toward anyone, she told her she should direct it toward the Devil Beast King. Moments later, Mary suddenly awoke in Nei's arms. Raising one finger, she chanted Flaresis Raeloth and unleashed the Sticky Threads attack. From her fingertip burst countless strands of shimmering thread that wrapped around the remaining 5 devil beasts in an instant. Mary declared that these threads would bind the rampaging monsters and enforce absolute silence upon them. The threads continued to coil tightly, layer after layer, until the creatures' bodies were entirely entombed, not a single limb left visible. Mary declared that it wasn't over yet. She knew all too well that no matter how hard they crushed these beasts, they would simply regenerate. Mary knew she had to finish them completely before her spell wears off. Mary raised her crest-marked hand and chanted Minas Gandaroa. In response, the earth itself surged upward, swallowing the bound devil beasts whole. Even the severed halves of those already fallen, still twitching and struggling on the ground, were dragged into the soil. Blood streamed freely from Mary's eyes and nose as she uttered the word, burial. The ground sealed shut. The monsters vanished, entombed beneath the earth as if they had never existed. Relief flooded Nei as she saw the battlefield clear. She praised Mary for her feat, calling her the ace of their group. But her relief quickly shifted to alarm. The bleeding from Mary's eyes and nose had grown severe. Mary turned her gaze to her weakly. She said that the words Nei had spoken earlier, they had reached her. Inside, she was certain, but before she could finish, her strength gave out, and she collapsed once more. Panic surged through Nei as she caught her, shaking her gently. She begged her to stay awake, calling her name over and over again. But Mary gave no response. Switching to Group B in the forest, the students were gasping for breath as they fought against the relentless devil beasts. A massive beast lay sprawled on the ground with its eyes bulging out, yet one student continued to stare at it warily. As he feared, no matter how many times they destroyed these creatures' bodies, they would simply rise again and again. He was certain that the monster before him would soon stand once more, as though nothing had happened. Adding to their struggle was the dense mist enveloping the forest, obscuring their sense of direction mid-battle. Exhausted beyond measure, the student muttered that he would sit down for a moment, convinced he had already reached his limit. Their group's leader, Ray, noticed that this student was now the only one left standing. But he was bleeding from his nose, strained from the endless combat. The weary student called out to Ray, telling him he was special, better off without any dead weight. A moment later, the student collapsed unconscious onto the ground. Ray could only stare silently at the fallen boy. As he watched, something strange began to emerge from the unconscious student's mouth. Curiosity sparked in Ray's eyes at the sight. Back to Nay's side of the battlefield, she gently laid Mary down and called out to her repeatedly, begging her to open her eyes. She urged her not to sleep there, pleading with her to stay awake. But then she noticed the same eerie phenomenon, something slowly seeping out of her mouth. Alarmed, Nay quickly stood up. She hadn't expected this at all and questioned what it could be. Panicking, she wondered if this was even supposed to be happening. Unsure of what else to do, she pressed her hand over Mary's mouth to stop it. But even with her hand firmly in place, the strange substance continued to slip through, rising into the air. Horrified, Nay begged her again to wake up, desperately calling her name. All of the students who had been defeated and lost consciousness in Salsian experienced the same phenomenon. Something emerged from their mouths. Instructor Langface witnessed it as well and was stunned by what he saw. He muttered in disbelief, wondering aloud if the Chancellor's plan had already begun. The strange things that emerged from the students' bodies ascended into the air, drifting upward in unison. From atop the Black Tower, Clen noticed the spectacle and furrowed his brow in confusion, questioning what those things were and where they were headed. Observing closely, he realized they were moving toward the school building, which made him pause to think about the implications. Moments later, Clen spotted something else approaching from below, a figure moving steadily closer to his location. Though it seemed to be getting lost at first, there was a distinct light guiding it directly toward him. The figure navigated through the forest, which made Clen question whether he is coming. It crossed over water and ascended swiftly toward the Black Tower. It didn't take long before it arrived at Clen's position. Standing fearlessly before him was none other than Ray Forrester, prompting the Devil Beast King to ask if that was truly who he was. While floating in the air, he confirmed that yes, he was Ray Forrester. He then called out his full name, Clen Bardis, and asked if he remembered his face. Clen questioned if what he meant was before he came to Salsian, but he answered nope. Ray simply muttered, "I see." He raised his hand bearing a crest and uttered "Accelerate State," summoning lightning. He then flew at tremendous speed using Lightning Dash. Clen could hardly believe that he was using 2 runes. Ray darted about while closing in on Clen, who stood motionless. As Ray launched his attack and neared him, Clen merely smiled and used his hand to block it. Clen did not even budge from where he stood despite the force behind Ray's strike. The lightning was strong, and Clen acknowledged how impressive that power was. He asked if this was how Ray had defeated his minions. Ray had not expected him to remain calm even after that. Yet Ray claimed he was only warming up. He distanced himself and said there was an explanation Clen needed to give him. Clen was puzzled upon hearing this. Meanwhile, Ray produced 3 blades between his fingers and invoked Accelerate. He hurled them toward Clen's face, but he blocked them with his tail. Ray did not stop there. He summoned lightning again, which suddenly struck the Black Tower. Clen was shocked that Ray could bring down lightning without even casting. Ray descended and faced him, asking who he was and how he had obtained that face. He suggested that perhaps Clen had used a death mask, but such a mask required a model to create. Thus, he demanded to know when and where Clen had acquired the model of that face, pressing him for an answer. And because of the tone in his voice, Clen realized that the man might know him. This was the first time he had encountered someone who recognized that face. Could this be the reason why he had been wary of him all this time? Ray insisted that the name of the one who owned that face was Zero. He was nobler and more valiant than anyone else. A flashback followed of a devil beast attacking a town. Someone shouted to alert everyone that a devil beast had appeared. Panic erupted as the people saw it. They ran frantically, desperate to escape. In the creature's path were children, one of whom was Ray. He tried to pull his companion to stand, but the child could not. At that moment, someone leapt from the top of a building, catching Ray's attention. It was Zero, armed with a sword. Without fear, he drove his sword into the creature's left eye. Confidence radiated from Zero's gaze, as though he truly believed he could face even a devil beast. According to Ray, nobody had a heart more fitting for a hero than he did. After stabbing the beast's eye, he pulled out the sword, causing blood to pour from the creature's eye. The devil beast thrashed in pain, and Zero lost his balance as a result. Even so, he managed to land properly on the ground. He suddenly shouted for them to run toward the narrow valley. He rushed to the children, urging them to take the younger ones and move forward. They hurriedly complied and fled, but the devil beast gave chase. Ray was shocked to see that they had run straight into a dead end. Now there was nowhere left for them to run. To make matters worse, the devil beast had already entered the area. Instead of being afraid, Zero merely smiled and said it was fine. When Ray asked why, Zero replied that normally, a devil beast would not die from a poke on the eye alone. However, he had already coated his sword with a poison deadly to their kind. Ray was shocked to hear about the poison. Zero explained that this was his trick and warned him not to tell anyone, gesturing for him to keep it secret before smiling. True enough, before the creature could reach them, the devil beast began struggling to breathe. It suddenly collapsed in the narrow alley. As it fell, Zero remarked that this was exactly what he meant. He leapt onto the creature's body, climbing up its back. Upon reaching the top, he raised his sword high. Countless onlookers outside witnessed the scene and cheered. They rejoiced at Zero's victory. Proudly, he displayed his sword for all to see. Not far away, a merchant selling swords declared that they had now seen the power of such blades. He assured them these were genuine, actual magic swords originating from Haydn. Ray was impressed when he realized this was the case. The merchant offered the swords to the crowd, asking if they wanted them for self-defense. He advertised them as cheap and currently on sale. This prompted many to eagerly buy, showing interest in his wares. Meanwhile, Zero, Ray, and the children dismounted from the dragon's back. Zero apologized for involving them in his father's business. He then offered to walk them home and talk along the way. Ray asked if it was really all right for him to leave just like that. Zero replied that it seemed he needed to do a favor to keep him quiet. Looking at him, he admitted that for some unknown reason, he felt attracted to him. Ray was startled upon hearing this and froze. He pointed out that they were both men. Zero insisted that was not what he meant. What he meant was fate. He described it as that very moment when two gears clicked together, when they meshed and began to turn like the hands of a clock, and in turn set other gears spinning as well. That was how it felt, he said. He believed their meeting was destined. A single gear moving in one direction could begin to spin differently, all because of one fateful encounter. He smiled, saying that was exactly how he felt now. Their meeting was bound to have a profound effect on the world they lived in. Ray pondered those words and said he's acting like he's on something. Perhaps others would call him a space case. Zero chuckled and replied that no, though sometimes people called him a fruitcake. The children with Ray gasped in surprise upon hearing that and said they wanted one. They asked their big brother Ray if they could get some. He answered that maybe next time. Zero clarified what he meant. Gears would never start turning unless they meshed. Moments later, they arrived at their home. That, Ray explained, was their place. Zero was surprised to learn it was an orphanage. Ray confirmed it, saying most of them were war orphans or abandoned children. Their manager was a princess who visited them from time to time. If they achieved good grades and earned her approval, they could be transferred to Salsian, a prestigious school, and that was Ray's goal. Zero assured him he would succeed, guaranteeing it. However, Ray said such assurances meant little, especially since they had just met, and he doesn't even know his name. Zero then introduced himself as Zero Kratos. When he asked in return, Ray introduced himself as Ray Forrester. He froze for a moment when Zero extended his hand for a handshake. As their hands met, a clicking sound echoed, startling Ray. Zero asked if he had heard it too, saying it was the sound of gears meshing. Ray thought he really had heard it. Zero bid them farewell, saying he and his father would stay there for a while. He was glad to have met him. Ray waved back at him, thinking that they would become the closest of friends, the one and only irreplaceable kind. Back in the present, as Ray charged forward, he declared that he had seen a true hero in Zero, a hero who transcended his birth and upbringing. Zero was, in Ray's eyes, the one person in the world most worthy of being called a hero. But something happened. The scene shifted back to the past, to a day when someone came running in panic, shouting the terrible news. He reported to those around him that Haydn, across the border of Hydrat, had been attacked by a devil beast king. Those who heard him were stunned and asked if they had heard him right. Hydrat. The messenger, panting heavily, added that people were flooding into the area, fleeing to save their lives. The same, he said, was happening in Bolet. Among the crowd, now a student of Salsian, Ray noticed the commotion and pushed his way through, pleading for everyone to let him pass. This was his first time returning to his hometown, yet he hadn't expected to find it in such chaos. As he heard the news, his mind flashed back to what Zero had recently told him, that they were heading to Hydrat. During their last conversation, Zero had mentioned that his father would be heading to the shaft near El Bay to stock up on swords, while he himself would stand guard at the fort in Haydn. Zero had also told his friend Ray that he had made a decision. He would take up the challenge. This year, he would become the 14th hero, and he expected Ray to root for him. Still shoving through the crowd, Ray apologized repeatedly for forcing his way past people. At last, he reached the heart of the commotion and saw why the crowd had gathered. A father knelt on the ground, sobbing uncontrollably as he cradled the lifeless body of his son. He wept openly, unable to bear the loss, crying out again and again that his child was dead. That child was Zero. The father screamed in anguish, demanding to know why his son had gone to the castle, why it had to end this way. Ray stood frozen, stunned at the sight before him. His thoughts reeled as he struggled to comprehend why his friend Zero had died, and why he wore an expression of satisfaction even in death. Shifting back to the confrontation between Clen and Ray demanded that Clen Bardis explain himself. He pressed for answers, asking who Clen really was and why he had appeared before him wearing that face. Ray prepared to attack. Wind enveloped his right hand while lightning surged around his left. He fused the two elements together, his voice trembling with fury as he questioned what Clen had done to Zero. Clen admitted, almost casually, that the story was intriguing, so the name of that person was Zero. He remarked with detached curiosity that Zero had died with such a satisfied expression on his face. Rage consumed Ray upon hearing this, and he poured every ounce of his strength into striking Clen down. But Clen moved first. In an instant, he closed the distance and seized Ray by the mouth, coldly confessing that he had indeed killed him. He claimed, however, that it had not been intentional, merely collateral damage. He added that he had not even known how Zero had died. He had only copied his face because it was the only one he could remember. To him, there was no deeper meaning behind it. Ray's energy faltered, his prepared attack dispersing the moment Clen's grip tightened on his jaw. Without hesitation, Clen hurled him with overwhelming force. Ray's body was flung through the air, crashing violently onto the floor. The impact shattered the ground of the Black Tower, sending debris and dust spiraling into the air. From a distance, the devastation was visible, smoke cloaking the battlefield. Clen descended calmly toward Ray, who now lay battered and struggling for breath. Despite his injuries, Ray refused to yield. While lying on the ground, he forced out the words to activate his ability, Recovery Speed. At once, his body entered accelerate mode. His eyes glowed crimson as he not only accelerated his healing, but also his reaction speed and physical enhancement. With a sharp inhale, Ray pushed himself upright, defying the pain that racked his body. Lightning flared in his hand, forming into a blade. Gripping the crackling weapon in his left hand, he launched himself forward using Lightning Dash, leaping straight at Clen for another assault. However, Clen remained completely unfazed. Ray's eyes stayed locked onto him as he charged forward at blinding speed. He noticed, to his disbelief, that Clen's gaze could still follow his movements. In response, Ray pushed himself even further, accelerating his lightning dash beyond its limits. Clen stood unmoving, still holding the Book of Toa, while Ray circled him at a speed so fast that his form became nearly invisible. Ray couldn't believe Clen could still keep up with him and spat out that he was a monster. Frustrated that none of his attacks were landing, Ray unleashed super hyper-acceleration, pushing his body to extremes. The speed was so intense that blood began streaming from his eyes and nose, yet he continued to attack relentlessly. His movements tore through the air, sharp and precise, until at last he managed to clip strands of Clen's hair and graze his cheek. Seeing an opening, Ray appeared behind Clen and declared that this was the end. A grin spread across Clen's face, unshaken even as Ray's lightning blade cleaved through his head, severing it cleanly. At last, Ray had struck him down, but his triumph was short-lived. Blood pouring from his eyes and nose due to the overuse of magic, Ray froze as a hand suddenly gripped his own head. Clen's voice cut through the haze, mocking him. "Too bad," he said, because Ray had only struck his shadow. Behind him, the shadow form of Clen loomed. With brutal force, Clen slammed Ray's head into the ground. Since Ray had been Ciro's friend, Clen declared that he would make a special exception and reveal his true nature. Before Ray's stunned eyes, Clen unveiled his Devil Beast form, proclaiming himself as the Devil Beast King, Clevatess. He was the one who had destroyed the castle of Hydrat and buried Ray's friend alive beneath its rubble. Lying bloodied on the ground, Ray trembled at the revelation of Clevatess's name. He demanded to know why a Devil Beast King would choose to steal the face of his friend Ciro. Clevatess answered calmly that it was a long story. Even as his body failed him, Ray's resolve burned. He would avenge his friend no matter what. But Clen stopped him cold, telling him he had pushed himself too far. By all rights, his body should no longer be capable of movement. Clen commended him, admitting that Ray had done well, but sneered that his efforts were still nothing compared to him. Helpless and enraged, Ray could do nothing more. In that moment, a memory surfaced, a quiet night on the rooftop, lying beneath the open sky alongside Ciro. Ciro had asked him about his dream, catching him off guard. Ray had been unable to answer at the time. Ciro, however, revealed his own, to become a hero. He spoke with unwavering confidence, his swordsmanship honed thanks to their family business and years of training. In the not-so-distant future, Ray believed he would one day stand as a true hero, like the ones pulled straight from the fairy tales. Ray laughed at the thought and said he genuinely believed his friend could achieve it. He then wondered aloud about his own dream, admitting he wanted to become a great sage. Ciro was surprised by his answer, prompting Ray to clarify that the great sage was the one who guided the hero and held authority over Salcian. To him, the sage seemed more elite than the hero. Ciro laughed heartily and said it suited him perfectly. Back in the present, a storm of emotions welled inside the bloodied Ray. He couldn't accept his defeat and was desperate to avenge his fallen friend. Meanwhile, after knocking Ray down, Clen sensed something behind him. He turned and remarked that it was about time he showed up. The figure he referred to was none other than Vordain, appearing in his lizard form. Vordain claimed that Clevatess severely underestimated the hominids far too much. There is a dormant power lying deep within people. At that moment, Ray, exhausted and barely clinging to consciousness, grasped Clen's leg, drawing the Devil Beast King's attention downward. Despite being drained of strength, Ray continued to fight and activated conditional acceleration. Everything within the area that wasn't in direct contact with his body sped up under his control. Clen hadn't anticipated this maneuver, momentarily thrown off by Ray's plan, while Vordain seized the opportunity to move. Vordain leapt onto Clen's body, catching him off guard. Grabbing the Book of Toa, Vordain stated that before taking it, he had one last thing to say to Clevatess. In an instant, the book vanished from Clen's grasp as Vordain leapt away with it. He declared that the key ingredient of a true hero was a heart that cherished friends.